Their blessing's awesome. Mai's blessing is so powerful. As a berserker, Mordred clearly felt that her physical strength had been strengthened dramatically. Just as the members of the Starwing Knights had different adaptations to different talents, Mordred had very high adaptability to Miu Miu's diamond body. Not only just the height of her body improved, but also there were incredible changes happening inside her body. The density of bones, nerves, and muscles, all parameters related to strength, increased continuously. Mordred took a deep breath and then a clear crack went throughout her body. It was the resonance of bones and muscles. It was the cheer of the berserker physique. Now, she could be sure that it wasn't a dream. Power, speed, recovery ability, all the values related to the berserker body had been greatly increased. If this wasn't a miracle, then nothing could be called a miracle. Puff. What a wonderful blessing. Alexander showed a strange smile. She also acquired Miu Miu's talent, but it wasn't Miu Miu's diamond body but something else. That was one of Miu Miu's advantages that even Yoon she hadn't discovered yet. Walking to the carriage not far away, Alexander touched the tall horse's head and simply said a word, "Hello." The tall horse felt weak and almost knelt down in front of Alexander, which was the natural response of ordinary animals to the pressures of a superior being. Alexander's talent, King's Cavalry, was improved by Miu Miu's unknown talent and once again raised to a more terrible field. Maybe this talent could be renamed Cavalry on a Dragon's Back. As for Rose, her changes were the biggest. Rip! With a sharp tearing sound, Rose screamed and looked at the bandage which was suddenly tore open by her suddenly growing breasts. Undoubtedly, the breasts which symbolized her witch talent had become bigger than before. With the fall of the snow-white bandage, Rose's charming, smooth, round breasts were once again exposed in front of Yunxi. Pink and white. The delicate twin peaks rippled out a thrilling arc in the air. The fruits were so huge, but the buds in front of the chest were a lovely pink. A beautiful arc formed from her chest, after reaching the apex, followed by a downward arc, outlining that pair of delicate crystal white was cream buns. With her breathing, this pair of enlarged peaks swayed slowly and repeatedly, making Yunxi's eyes dazzled. Oh, it must be because of the twin witch's mentality talent. Rose must have great adaptability with the twin witch's talents, which wasn't a 1+1 improvement, but was more like a fierce chemical reaction. As a result, Rose's source of magic was instantly promoted to an incredible level. The witch's blessing, curse, faithfully reflected this change, breaking open the bandage. Oh, no. Why did my chest get bigger again? I don't want it. The little witch burst into tears. She was clearly a leader of flat-chested witches, who advocated that witches should enhance their personality and charm by exploring the source of magic and understanding the rules of magic. Why are her breasts still getting bigger? She likes poor breast. We should become a great witch not with our own talents but with our own effort. This was the declaration of flat-chested witches. Although none of these flat-chested witches had become a great witch with their own efforts, it was still a belief of many witches. Rose had many good friends who had this belief. If they saw her appearance now, they would definitely break off relations with her. No. It's not my fault. Why doesn't Mai's blessing make my breasts smaller? The little witch cried like a child when she said the words, which, if heard by the Starwing Knights, were enough to cause an uprising. It doesn't matter. Whether your breasts are big or small, we are your friend. Rose, cheer up. Lancelot quickly inspected Rose's chest and got an enviable figure, then she began to weave a new bandage for Rose. Yes, we are your friends, we don't mind it. Mordred brandished her two-handed heavy sword. In fact, her breasts had also become a little bigger, but weren't that noticeable like Rose's. You should learn to get used to it. It's not a shame. If you have a pair of big breasts, it's comfortable to need them. Alexander smiled and rubbed Rose's twin peaks with a pleasant look. Oh, yes, this hand feel is perfect. It's perfect to get bigger, little Rose. Cough. Please respect yourself, everybody. Yunxi had turned around long ago, but that pair of snow-white peaks continuously appeared in his mind, which made him feel despair. Except for Lancelot, they are all problem girls. Who are you? On what basis do you think this team is very suitable for the Starwing Knights? That's of course because they have big breast. My, didn't you very much like big-breasted girls? This was already an open secret in the Starwing Knights from a long time ago. The imprint is strengthened. On the roof of the girls' dormitory of the White Lotus Sword Palace, Robin sat there and looked towards the end of the horizon. You can't be happy. It's too luxurious for you. Have you ever seen your hands stained with blood, little bloody bird? Robin doesn't fly in the sky freely. It's not her world. Come back, come back, come back, go back to the world of blood and killing. The birds symbolizing ominousness and death were low whispers around Robin's ears, tempting her to go back to a world full of death, which does not belong to the mortal world. In her pupils, there were patterns of thorns and flowers, either of which was bloody. As a member of the Starwing Knights, she had also acquired extraordinary talents suitable for herself, the Twin Witch's mentality talent. Very few of the girls of the Starwing Knights could obtain the Twin Witch's talents. As the gods' servants, White Lotus and Red Lotus had incredible amounts of spiritual power. Acquiring their talents, Robin could now see her fate more clearly. It had never been changed. The future she saw with her ability was still full of blood and death. Once she descended from into the nightmare world, she had no way back. I'm getting stronger. Closing her eyes, Robin clearly felt the power of fate surging through her body, and now she could even clearly see the upper limit of life for the vast majority of people. In the entire White Lotus Sword Palace, more than 90% of the disciples had less than 300 years of life, which meant that even if they had a smooth life, it wasn't possible for them to live more than 300 years. Only the lives of the master of the White Lotus Sword domain and several tutors were beyond this limit. However, it was clear that the master of the White Lotus Sword domain's time was up, and Robin could even see the death aura around his body. Probably, in less than 10 years, the master of the White Lotus Sword domain would come to the end of his life. On the contrary, there were still monsters whose life forces were far stronger than the master of the White Lotus Sword domain in the White Lotus Sword Palace. For example, the Twin Witches. Robin couldn't even see the upper limit of the life of White Lotus and Red Lotus. Similarly, she couldn't predict the limit of Hua Hua's life. Just looking at Hua Hua, Robin could feel her strong life force that could crush everything. This was a rare experience for Robin. In theory, as long as a person was still at the hero rank, she could figure out the approximate range of the person's life. The vast majority of ordinary people couldn't live more than 100 years, and the lives of hero-ranked people were between 300 years and 1,000 years. Human beings are short-lived creatures. The upper limit of their lives is not worth mentioning compared with the lives of dragons and elves. Unless the person could step into the legend rank, the person's life could truly exceed this numerical range and even reach infinity, just like Cassina the battle god. In the past, Robin couldn't see the life limit of legend-ranked beings, but now there were 3 such monsters in the White Lotus Sword Palace. Similarly, there was also a strange thing here. That was the girls of the Starwing Knights. When she first observed the life limit of the members of the Starwing Knights, she wondered if there was something wrong with her eyes. Why do all of them have lives close to 5 digits? How can this be true? Even the upper limit of her life was changed. In the past, her life was always a negative number in her eyes, but now the number became a positive number. Only she understood what this meant. Humans are the most standard life form in the endless gods' domains. Nothing is the best, and nothing is the lowest. The overall value of human talent has always maintained a constant level for thousands of years. In the endless gods' domains, the human race is a benchmark to measure the value of a race. The races whose value is below the humans are lower races, while those far beyond the humans are the higher races. In any case, the life of human beings, even if they are at the hero rank, cannot naturally reach 5-digit. The existence of the Starwing Knights clearly transcended the boundaries of human beings, and now, after she became a member of this special group, she finally found the root cause. Mai's blessing, or Mai's curse, is irrevocable bondage. This is Mai's blessing. Feeling the source of magic formed in her body, Robin finally understood where the root of all this came from. The source of magic. Why? Isn't this a witch's talent? No, 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 no. Something is wrong. Curse, curse, curse. The witch's curse is coming. Finding that Robin suddenly had something she shouldn't have, the bloody bird screamed with panic. I see. So, even you don't understand this phenomenon? A ball made of blood floated on Robin's fingertip. Her eyes gazed at the ball, seemingly seeing a distinct future. To overcome the curse of Robin's, only to find a stronger curse, blessing. Now she found it. It's a blessing, and also a curse. More blood wrapped around Robin's fingertip, which was a force she couldn't use before, a source power of nightmare creatures. At this moment, she finally gained her first strength in the invincible curse. The blood rippled and formed a pool of blood at Robin's foot. Her tiny figure sank into the pool and disappeared from the world. The Blood Walker awakened at this moment. From this moment on, she was no longer just an observer of fate. Blood and curses are with her. After trying every possible way to persuade Rose, she finally agreed to put on the new bandage made by Lancelot, and Yunshi finally concluded the entrance test. To be honest, Yunshi would rather fight 100 green hippos for 3 days and 3 nights than have another assessment like this. For him, such an assessment was a little too fascinating. Fortunately, after returning to the girls' dormitory, Yu told him that the next entrance test would be held after half a month. It was to test the civilian girls of the Sword Palace. Their strength had a significant difference with the Magic and Knights team, therefore, if they want to join the Starwing Knights, they need to undergo more preliminary examinations. Of course, if you really like it, you can add people in at any time. Because the Starwing Knights are Mai's knights. Yu looked at Yunshi's embarrassed face with a smile, just as she had seen through his nature. I didn't build the Starwing Knights. Yunshi felt innocent. Who could have imagined the sudden rise of the Starwing Knights? Yeah, I never thought that the Starwing Knights would become what they are now. It's not just 1 or 2 forces that want to rob us. Likewise, there are not just 1 or 2 people who want to join the Starwing Knights. Yu had never expected that the original small group would now grow to this scale. The origin of everything was because of Mai's blessing. The power of this blessing was 100 times stronger than the legendary black-haired girl's lucky charm. Why does no one want to leave this small group? Yu was sure that if they had the chance when they were still in the entrance test of the Sword Palace, many of the girls of the Starwing Knights would make a different choice. However, a person, or rather to say, a belief changed everything. Because of this person and belief, they began to firmly believe that they will become stronger and better, until they can match this person. Because of this person, no matter what temptation they face, even if that temptation comes from gods and demons, their beliefs will never waver. Every word and compliment of this person makes them blush and makes their heartbeat race. Having her is like having the world. It belongs to the world of the Starwing Knights, it is the ultimate fantasy of the girls. Probably, even if they knew this person is actually this belief would not change. You are such a liar. Humph, you are not an honest person at all. Yu thought and couldn't help but pinch Yunshi's cheek with jealousy. Only by this person's side would she forget her dignified disguise and become a mischievous girl. Yunshi sighed deeply. Yunshi looked at Maya in front of him with doubtful and incredulous eyes. Parfu. The green slime also looked at the star elf suspended in the air, even though it didn't know why it would do this. Tell me, this is a true star trial, not something else. Yunshi looked at Maya with an almost imploring look. If Maya sent him to the fire god's world or wind god's world, he would go crazy. You did well in the water god's world, master. Maya looked at her master with a strange expression and shook her head. There is only one god in the White Lotus Sword domain, the water god. This is a regular star trial, there should be no god rivals. Nevertheless, you still need to explore the details yourself. Yunshi breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it was no longer another place like the water god's fantasy island, everything was okay. For him, what happened in the water god's world almost gave him have a psychological shadow. Well, go ahead, master. Maya gently approached Yunshi and kissed him on the lips. In the sweet and touching whisper of the star elf, countless stars fell. The 3rd star trial began. Tonight, there were many young girls who also entered the same dream. Prince. Familiar and unfamiliar voices were ringing in his ears. Yunshi opened his hazy eyes and looked at the unfamiliar ceiling. The ceiling is engraved with the pattern of sun, moon, mountains, and rivers, just like a shrinking world. As his mind recovered, the task of this star trial appeared in his mind. The name of the world, Dragon War. Main quest, defeat the terrible dragon that is raging across the kingdom. Optional quest 1, girls fighting against the evil dragon. Leading the Starwing Knights to defeat the dragon and receive a huge reward. Optional quest 2, the whispers of the witches, find the legendary witches and get their help. Optional quest 3, the whisper of the ancient gods. May the great old gods bless you. Optional quest 4, dragon's secret treasure. To find the hidden treasure of the dragon. Well, this is a normal trial. Yunshi was about to shed tears when he looked at the quests. There were clear enemies that must be defeated. There is no need to force himself to marry millions of brides. There are no compulsory side quests. There is only one road to the goal. It seemed that even without the help of anybody, he could hope to accomplish the task by himself. More importantly, this was a normal star trial, which meant that after the trial, everyone would forget about the world. This is the star trial he wants. He's ready. He's going to slaughter the dragon by himself. All of you in the Starwing Knights, I won't bother you this time. I'll solve everything by myself. Prince, have you gotten up yet? The familiar voice continued to ring in Yunshi's ear. In a particularly good mood, Yunshi looked at the owner of the voice. A bright red cloak, seemingly plain face, and the beautiful badge of transparent wings stretching out from the two sides of the starry sky. This was the badge recently ordered by the Starwing Knights. It was the symbol of the Starwing Knights. It seems that in this star trial, the girls of the Starwing Knights were on his side as always. Nevertheless, it doesn't matter. This time, I don't need you to fight for me. I can solve all the problems by myself. Prince, your future is very bright. You are the hope of the world, the next king. On the day you were born, everyone was cheering for you. Even if there are evil dragons, they can't hide your glory. God is watching you. You are the only son of destiny. Please let us be your strength, our prince. The bloody augur lowered her head gently and told Yunshi the prophecy of his fate. Unfortunately, Yunshi was so excited that he didn't even hear a word. Because this time he was going to challenge the dragon alone. Sure enough, everyone in the Starwing Knights is here. They seemed to have accepted their status as the regular knights of the kingdom and were working hard to practice and exercise in the name of the Starwing Knights. This time, I won't bother you, I will solve everything. I will directly go to the dragon's nest and slay the dragon, and ignore all the side quest. Since it wasn't the real world, then he could get the souls by defeating the enemies. As long as he collected enough souls to strengthen himself, 1 or 2 evil dragons were nothing in his eyes. Puff! The green slime curiously rolled around on the ground, seemingly adapting to the different magic of the world. Let's go. Yunshi started the trial of the Dragon War. In the forest, Yunshi met a long-lost old friend. It's a green hippo again. After experiencing so many things, the green hippo was no longer a boss in his eyes. He skillfully sprinted and rolled on the ground. Taking advantage of the green hippo as it slapped on the ground, he directly cut off the green hippo's huge buttocks. Boom! The green hippo rolled over and crushed. Without blinking his eyes, Yunshi took a step back and brandished the twin swords. With a beautiful heavy chop, the green hippo was cut in half. A large number of souls spilled over. For him now, killing the green hippo was just a little warm-up exercise. Sure enough, the green hippo can't satisfy me anymore. After absorbing the green hippo's souls, Yunshi shook his head. Of course, his strength was much stronger than when he first saw the green hippo, and the green hippo's souls weren't enough to make him stronger now. However, as long as killing the green hippos could let him obtain souls, Yunshi wouldn't let go of it. How many green hippos are there in this forest? Yunshi looked at the forest with excitement, and began to sweep through the green hippo in the forest. Pafu, Pafu, Pafu. From left to right, from south to north, from west to east. Yunshi was sure that all green hippos in the forest were killed, Then he stopped and sat down by the bonfire in the forest to rest. That's great satisfaction. Happily counting the trophies he had harvested, Yunshi sighed with satisfaction. Although a green hippo's soul couldn't strengthen his power, but after collecting so many green hippo's souls, his strength had still been improved a bit. Are the green hippos just monsters in the periphery? Taking out the map which marked the mountains occupied by the dragon, Yunshi showed an eager look. Now, my position should be here. He made a mark on the map. The bonfire here indicated that the first stage of the star trial had been completed. Next is to look for a second bonfire. After hunting more than 100 green hippos, Yunshi just took a short rest by the bonfire and began exploring more dangerous areas. He had a hunch that maybe the time for him to encounter the dragon was near. After all, there were only 3 areas on this map. The first area where many green hippos were found was marked. The second area was marked with many strange axe monsters sketch. And there was a dragon sketch on the third area on the map. With such a clear map, no one would lose the target. However, these lovely sketches must be painted by Ling Ling. Even the dragon sketch was chubby, not like an evil dragon at all. It should be a dragon that is stronger than the male fierce dragon. Yunshi was ready for it. Boom! A black axe drew a vicious track in the air, brushing past Yunshi's forehead and blowing his whole person out. There were 2 more axes flying towards Yunshi. With all his effort, he fortunately dodged them, but a strand of his hair was cut off. They are strong. They were the monsters in the second area, a kind of giant monster with sacks on the head and big axes in both hands. The monster was about 3 meters tall, the fierce muscles showed a dark glow, but they had a completely incompatible moving speed with that huge body. What's more, they acted collectively, with small teams of at least 3 members and big groups of almost 100 members. The second bonfire was located in the middle of the Black Axe Monster's patrol route. Is this a bonfire party for me? Stepping on the twin swords, Yunshi wiped his sweat. It was very dangerous. He was almost killed before he reached the bonfire. If so, he would have to revive at the bonfire in the first area. These black monsters were much tougher than the green hippos. So, since I can't go straight in. Yunshi squinted as he watched the black axe monsters hovering around the unknown ruins. These black axe monsters were like tools of killing. Once they left the ruins and entered the kingdom, a slaughter was inevitable. Ahu! Having eaten a piece of golden bread made by himself, Yunshi's energy was refreshed. Let me solve you here. Picking up a handful of pebbles from the ground, Yunshi decided to take advantage of his greatest strength and solve the fierce black monsters one by one. Shuffle. A snow-white pebble hit the nearest black monster's head, triggering the monster's counterattack mechanism. Boom. Like a raging beast, the black axe monster rushed out of the ruins and ran directly at Yunshi. Yes, that's it. One by one, one by one. I can kill all of them in this manner. Yunshi showed a smile, pulled out the twin swords and dashed toward the black axe monster. Yes, I will win. Yunshi was so sure. Boom. The black axe monster fiercely brandished the two-handed axe again. Compared with green hippos, black axe monsters apparently mastered a very high killing skill, which could only be mastered in the battlefield, without any redundant action. The blood that was still remaining on the black two-handed axe was the best proof. Yunshi stepped on one of the crane-wing twin swords with one foot, turning over in the air with an action that no ordinary people could make, and the other sword drew out a beautiful arc in the air, thrusting at the black axe monster like a flying swallow. Kai! The black axe monster's head was cut off as a lot of blood was spewed out. As Yunshi had expected, when it was a one-on-one battle, he could win. Even though the black axe monster had superb killing skills, it still couldn't defeat Yunshi, who could fly in the air. Although Yunshi could only fly in the sky for a short time by stepping on the twin swords, it was still a great advantage in battle that could let him opponents feel despair. This black axe monster was the best proof. Yes. Let me continue. Yunshi breathed a sigh of relief as he stepped on the black axe monster's body. However, he didn't notice that the black monster's body under his feet swelled abnormally. As if it had lost all its weight, it turned into a soft balloon-like material. The black axe monster's souls were 10 times more than the green hippo's, which proved the strength of this black axe monster. Grasping the pebbles again, Yunshi locked in a small team of 3 black axe monsters and hit one of them on the top of the head. Boom! Like the first one, the second black axe monster rushed forward, smashing the heavy axe in its hand towards Yunshi. Yunshi continued to play his advantages in moving speed and three-dimensional space. He accustomed to the black axe monster's attack and was ready to launch a fatal blow as long as the black axe monster showed any flaws. The heavy two-handed axe, of course, had the crushing, destructive power to tear the enemy's body at one blow, but it would inevitably have some buffer time after the attack, which was determined by the weapon's nature. The black axe monsters seemed to have infinite physical strength, but this still didn't violate the general laws of physics. Unlike Hua Hua's sky-flying sword, their attacks were traceable. After killing the third one, Yunshi had a general understanding of the black axe monster. Their souls were about 10 times as much as the green hippo's. In terms of strength, speed, and killing skills, their fighting power was about 5 times more than that of the green hippo, in terms of strength, speed, and killing skills. They had no wisdom, just patrolling in this unknown ruin following a specific routine. Once they found the intruder, they would chase after Yunshi, but once Yunshi ran 500 meters away from the ruins, they would give up pursuing. In that case, this area is the best hunting ground. After absorbing the 3 black axe monsters' souls, Yunshi drew a simple map and determined the next battle strategy. Although in terms of the number of souls, this monster was only equal to 10 green hippos, but the quality of the souls was far superior to that of green hippos. It was much more exciting to absorb a black axe monster's souls than to hunt 10 green hippos one by one. This was not a delusion but a true fact. The material of these monsters was also of higher quality. For example, only elite green hippo would drop green crystals after they were killed, and all the black axe monsters would drop green crystals after they were killed. Absorb them, crane wing twin swords. Yunshi let his strongest weapon at present absorb the green crystals to strengthen them. Perhaps after absorbing more high-level green crystals, they twin swords could level up. Yunshi had a small expectation. The next target is this team. Having killed one of the nearest patrol teams, Yunshi began to focus on another team close to him. Grasping the white pebbles in his hands, Yunshi locked one of the black axe monsters from hundreds of meters away. Hey! The pebble made a precise track and hit the black axe monster on the head. But this time, the black axe monster turned a blind eye and continued to move inside the ruins. Why? Yunshi was slightly surprised. Was the distance too far away? Or, if the black axe monsters couldn't find the attacker, they wouldn't take any actions. So, I have to get closer. Yunshi carefully stepped on the crane wing twin sword like gliding in the snow, and then went to the edge of the ruins again. Aiming at the black axe monster, he threw out the pebbles in his hands again. Hiss! There was a strange noise in the ruins. It wasn't the sound of the pebbles hitting the black axe monster, but something else. Hiss! Hiss! Like being infected by something, the strange voices were echoing one after another behind Yunshi. What? Yunshi turned around and saw the 3 dead black axe monsters bulging into large balloons and slowly standing up again. A large amount of blood spread out from the ground, covering the 3 black monsters' bodies. Although they had lost their heads, these black axe monsters carelessly raised the axes in their hands again, making a terrible scream. On their bodies, as well as on their weapons, a lot of unnatural bloodlines appeared. What bad luck! Yunshi instantly flew to the higher sky, trying to leave this strange ruins. Whizzing. Before he flew above more than 3 meters, Yunshi's body shivered. A bloody hole appeared on his shoulder without warning, and a great deal of blood burst out at once. What happened? What attacked me? Yunshi fell heavily from the sky and saw 3 blood axes severely cutting down towards his body. The burning bonfire brought Yunshi only a trace of warmth. He felt the world's deep malice against him. What the hell was that? After his death, all the souls he obtained before and even the strengthening of the twin swords disappeared, as if he didn't obtain the souls from the beginning. Having been chopped into mince by 3 big axes higher than himself, Yunshi seemed to have returned to the first trial when he first faced the green hippo, so weak and helpless. What attacked me? Yunshi was more concerned about the cause of death than the death itself. The enemies would revive after a short time, okay, Yunshi could accept it. Anyway, it was just a matter of time to kill them again. The keys were where did the attack that pierced his body come from and who the enemy was. Recalling the situation at that time, Yunshi pressed his shoulder, as if the pain still remained in his body. It seemed that his shoulder had been penetrated before he realized it. He felt that it should be a spear or a sword, because the pain of the body being pierced and the flesh being torn wouldn't deceive him. Remembering the pain of being chopped up by a huge axe later, the damage caused by the attack was even higher, mainly due to psychological shadows. The battle with Shea Longness in the water god's world made Yunshi have a delusion that he had become strong enough to fight against a legend-ranked opponent. There should be no enemies that could hurt him in the star trials. The reality told him that the idea was naive. The difficulty of this trial was hell-like. If once he was careless, he would be killed in any battle. Once again, standing by the bonfire, Yunshi stepped on the twin swords and headed towards the terrible ruins again. This time, instead of trying to kill the green hippos in the first area, he plunged directly from the air into the ruins with courage, flying directly to the bonfire, which represented the only safe place in the second area. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The unknown evil whisper resounded in his ear again, and Yunshi had the feeling of being stared at by something invisible again. Kai. At least, Yunshi saw what pierced through his body. It was a thorn, which looked like a sword and a spear. It was so fast that Yunshi could hardly respond to it. First his shoulder, then his right hand. Just for an instant, Yunshi's body had been pierced through 2 times, falling down from the air again. Boom, boom, boom. On the ground, countless black axe monsters surrounded him and dozens of black axes were raised high in the air. The next moment, Yunshi experienced how meat was chopped on the kitchen board again. After the 13th death, Yunshi revived beside the bonfire and stared at the warm bonfire with his eyebrows frowned. Parfu, the green slime, also revived. It still wasn't used to the deaths and looked at him with a grievance. Sorry, it's my fault. Yunshi touched the little fellow's head. It seemed that the green slime was seen as part of him. It was also revived by the bonfire after he was chopped up by the black axe monsters. What great frustration. The monsters in this ruin were far stronger than Yunshi had expected. The battles with them made Yunshi feel the great malice of the world again. Especially the attacks from those sharp thorns, Yunshi could find no way to dodge them. Because of them, he couldn't collect more souls. That is to say, if he couldn't kill all these monsters and light the second bonfire before he was killed by the thorns, Yunshi couldn't get any benefit at all in the ruin. At the end, where were the thorns coming from? Were they shot out by some invisible monsters? Yunshi faced similar desperation before. In the second star trial, Yunqi's arrows killed him countless times on the bridge she guarded. This time, the killer was more terrible than Yunqi, because Yunshi couldn't see where the monster was and how it came into play. When the transparent thorn appeared, it was basically equivalent to having been hit. Yunshi didn't even have a second to dodge the thorns when he found them, and these damn thorns seemed to be able to automatically lock on the target's body. That is to say, there are at least 2 kinds of enemies in the ruins. Yunshi updated the map by using the information he obtained at the cost of his life. On the map, the small teams of black axe monsters were represented by forks, the smallest 3 members teams were represented by small forks, and the largest 15 members teams were represented by large forks. It could be clearly seen that more than 100 black axe monsters were in the ruins. They weren't randomly distributed in the ruins. The closer he got to the center of the ruins, the more monsters there were. It was almost impossible to try to lure them all by throwing pebbles. Is there anything here? Yunshi carefully recalled the scenery he had seen from the air. He was convinced that in the center of the city there was an abandoned square. Not far from the square and under the steps was the location of the second bonfire. Observing with his naked eyes, he couldn't see anything special in this abandoned square. Well, I think I can only go and observe the square again. With a solemn look, Yunshi flew to the second area again. This time, instead of killing the black axe monsters, He turned his body over with the highest speed and craziest movements in the air, trying to dodge the invisible enemy's thorn attacks. His only goal was to rush to the mysteriously abandoned square and see what there was. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The familiar murmur of death resounded over the ancient ruins again. For the first time, Yunshi dodged a transparent torn when he flew at his full speed. He was delighted with such an unexpectedly good result. So, this attack was not invincible and he should really be able to dodge it. As long as my speed is fast enough, there is still hope to dodge them. In the next second, Yunshi finally broke through an invisible barrier and approached the core of the ruins for the first time. There, he saw thousands of weapons scattered densely over the abandoned square. What the hell? Are you kidding me? Once again, Yunshi was chopped into mince. In the darkness, Yunshi's eyes gazed at the bonfire in front of him with a helpless look on his face. 135 times. That was the number of times he challenged the ruins. Hacked to death by the Black Axe monsters, smashed to death, swung to death, he experienced all kinds of death. Occasionally, he could kill a few Black Axe monsters, but soon he would be locked by the invisible weapons, then was besieged by countless Black Axe monsters. The best result was only to kill about 10 Black Axe monsters in the periphery. As long as he got a little closer to the center of the ruins, the only thing that was waiting for him was another miserable death. According to the rules of the Star Trial, he must kill all the monsters in the second area before he could settle his harvest in the second bonfire and use the souls he acquired to strengthen himself. As long as he died once in the second area, the souls he had acquired would disappear. This was the rule of the Star Trial, cruel and true. If his opponents were just those Black Axe monsters, Yunshi would be more or less hopeful to achieve this goal. At least he wasn't afraid of these monsters if it was a one-on-one battle. In the previous Star Trial, the stone soldiers killed him countless times, but he eventually broke through their encirclement and arrived at the tower. However, this time, the difficulty in this area was even higher. There were unimaginable terrors in the center of the ruins. Among the 135 deaths, Yunshi only rushed to the square a few times and saw the dense cluster of weapons suspended over the square. The first time he saw the weapons in the square area, Yunshi was almost desperate. If the number was only a few dozen, he could give it a try. If the number was hundreds, it meant that the difficulty of the ruins was hell-like. However, the weapons Yunshi saw over the square were greater than thousands. Thousands of weapons floated over the square, showing a bright red color, constantly moving back and forth with a unique lore. They seemed to be the most competent soldiers. As soon as they found him, these weapons would quickly lock on him and then become invisible, giving him lethal strikes. Once Yunshi arrived at the square, what awaited him was a storm of attacks. The weapons that poured down from the sky were like the wind sweeping a fallen leaf, shattering Yunshi's body thoroughly. Even though Yunshi had experienced so many deaths, he couldn't help but feel desperate facing such a situation. Am I too weak? Yunshi doubted whether it wasn't the right decision to go to this area alone. This night, only the bonfire and Parfu in his arms could bring a little warmth to Yunshi's desperate heart. Parfu. Parfu's round body turned into Yunshi's favorite shape and let him rub and pinch it. Wheel, try again. Feeling the warmth of the little green slime in his hands, Yunshi breathed deeply and his eyes became firm again. The moon today is a little red. Looking up, an extraordinarily large round moon hung in the dark sky, illuminating the ruins not far away, covering the ruins in an abnormal red color. Is it a delusion? With such doubts, Yunshi once again stepped into the forbidden zone of life. This time, he didn't have to throw pebbles. Many Black Axe monsters had rushed out of the ruins in a fierce manner. Hiss, hiss, hiss. In the eerie murmurs, Yunshi failed to fly to the sky and was shot down by 3 invisible spiral spikes. Boom, boom, boom. The Black Axe monsters were in an abnormally mad mood. They instantly surrounded him and chopped him into a bunch of pulp. Yunshi died again. What a joke. Once again revived beside the bonfire, Yunshi gazed at the second area in despair. These Black Axe monsters suddenly went crazy and their attacks became more fierce. This wasn't a big deal actually. The real problem was these invisible spiral spikes. As long as there were these black monsters, there would be eerie whispers, and then the invisible spiral spikes would appear and kill him within 10 seconds. Now, even the forest that had been cleaned by Yoon, she was not safe anymore. These black axe monsters seemed to smell something and surround the bonfire. If it wasn't because the monsters couldn't find the bonfire and get close to this area, Yoon would have been chopped up countless times. What can I do? For the first time, Yoon found that he couldn't find any solution. There is no way out. Yoon was completely blocked at the bonfire. Looking gloomily at the black axe monsters who were searching for him around, Yoon had no way and simply laid down with Parfu in his arms. These common monsters are already so strong, then how strong could the dragon be? After calming down and sorting out the quests, Yoon found that he really looked down upon this star trial called Dragon War. Slaying the dragon alone by himself. What an absurd dream. If Hua Hua was here, she could probably slay the dragon, but his current self had no way to achieve this goal. Sigh. It looks like I have to do these side quests. Maybe I can find a way out from them. Yoon looked at the big full moon in the sky. The moonlight tonight was so beautiful and bright. Maybe it was the unique scenery in this world. The next morning, with the first ray of sunlight shone at the end of the horizon, Yoon found that the fierce black axe monsters had finally withdrawn like the fall of the tide. Even the whisper that always sounded him had stopped appearing, and the black axe monsters' footsteps became a little dull. During the day, their raging state will be removed automatically. No, maybe they can only play their full strength at night. During the night, Yoon never successfully rushed out of the bonfire area. He had to silently observe the black axe monsters and find their changes. Let me try again. Unlike the challenge in the previous star trial, this time, it was totally impossible for him to win. Because he couldn't understand what was attacking him and how he was killed. The most terrible thing was not a powerful opponent, but the unknown. If he couldn't understand what the enemies were, he had no way to defeat them. After all the black axe monsters left the forest, Yoon began his last try. This time, instead of challenging the horrible ruins, he tried to bypass this area and enter the dragon's nest by another route. Stepping on the twin swords, Yoon set out from the bonfire and tries to find ways to bypass the ruins. The first time, he flew to the highest sky he could reach. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The whisper of death appeared, which meant the failure of this attempt. He was shot down, chopped to death and revived beside the bonfire. Conclusion: there is no way to break through the ruins. The second time. From the left side, it should be detoured away from the ruins. Hiss, hiss, hiss. It was that voice again. It was everywhere. Why did the ruins appear again? I'm moving along a road more than 10 kilometers away from the ruins. He was shot down, chopped to death and revived beside the bonfire. Conclusion: there is no way to take a detour. The ruins can move. The third time. From a farther distance, which was almost a roundabout route outside the forest. In theory, even if the ruins could move, he wouldn't meet it at such a remote place. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The familiar whisper and familiar pain. Again, he was shot down and chopped to death. The final conclusion: the ruins should be an insurmountable entry point into the dragon's nest. It's an inescapable challenge. Maybe it was some kind of magic or some kind of curse. Anyway, if he wanted to fight the dragon, he must go through the ruins. There was no other way to avoid it. It's really a perfect defense. After more than a dozen deaths, Yoon finally learned the lesson. It was impossible for him to break this line of defense. Unless he immediately mastered Yoon's quadrant sword or the sky flying sword, he had zero possibility of breaking through the barrier. Is this a prophecy? It was the first time Yoon had heard such a wonderful prediction from the bloody birds flying above Robin's shoulders. Prince, I suggest you go to the library to find clues. The Forgotten Ruins isn't something of our time. Robin changed the topic and gave Yoon a hint. All right. Eventually, Yoon had some clues about the ruins. He decided to follow Robin's direction, being a good student this time. Walking on the primitive corridor, Yunshi looked at the detailed and vivid reliefs on the wall, and felt that he had come to a different world. Speaking of this, the background of this world was incredibly detailed. Whether the magnificent palace or the wilderness, they looked 100% like the real world. Compared with the previous 2 trial worlds, this world was more vibrant, and the number of human beings living here was far more than those 2 trial worlds. According to the rules of the Star Trial, it seemed that the entire Starwing Knights had been summoned to this world, as well as other disciples of the White Lotus Sword Palace. As for the side quest The Whispers of the Witches, Yunshi had a vague guess. It should be the Twin Witches. After all, they were the strongest witches in the White Lotus Sword domain. Among the other 3 side quests, girls fighting against the evil dragon should refer to the Starwing Knights. There is no clue about the side quest The Whisper of the Ancient Gods, and Dragon's secret treasure should be related to the evil dragon. Now, his only clue was that there seemed to be a hidden truth about the forgotten ruins in the big library, and that truth pointed to some ancient curse. What on earth is that inexplicable attack? Yunshi sat in the big library with a lot of ancient books piled up in front of him. They were all the books related to the forgotten ruins he could find in this big library, which almost recorded everything that people knew about the ruins. These books were all banned books. If Yunshi had not the highest level of authority in the kingdom, he would probably not have been allowed to read these books, which represented bad luck. The origin of the forgotten ruins, the murdered queen, the curse of the bride, invisible land. Reading these books, Yunshi's eyebrows became more and more furrowed. The origin of the forgotten ruins, the origin of everything, can be traced back to thousands of years ago, startling from a noble queen who longed for perfect love. The kingdom she ruled was the predecessor of Yunshi's kingdom, named Assyria. She was born with super high spiritual talent, and her family had inherited the perfect blood of magic from generation to generation. This isn't the queen's bloodline the predecessor of the witch's bloodline? Apparently, the Assyrian queen's family was clearly the predecessor of the witch race. If she was born in the witch god's domain, she would certainly become a great witch. The queen was loved by the people of the kingdom, and her rule was unshakable. The only wish the perfect queen had was to have a fantastic lover. But she didn't find one. There was no person in the Assyria kingdom who was qualified to be the queen's husband. Not only was she perfect in appearance, but she also possessed overwhelming magic power and even close combat strength. As the strongest person in the history of the kingdom, her fighting ability could rival everyone in the whole kingdom, and even the arrogant dragon race was no match for her. She had become a legend, and she had broken the limits of human beings. No matter how time had passed, she didn't become old. The Great Queen ruled the Assyria kingdom for 300 years. During the 300 years, the queen had done her best to lead the kingdom to create miracles, one after another. Everyone thought that the Great Queen would continue to rule the Great Assyria kingdom for thousands of years. But as time went by, the queen became stronger and more lonely. Her relatives and friends all passed away in 300 years, even their descendants, and descendants' descendants had all died. The queen had become the strongest and loneliest human in the world. She couldn't find a partner, and no one in the kingdom could accompany her. Everyone respected such a queen, they regarded her as the incarnation of gods, and built numerous altars for her. God is sacred and inviolable. Just because the queen was in a low mood, some people would commit suicide and use their blood to prove their loyalty. The queen became increasingly unhappy, but couldn't find a solution to her problem. The perfect queen, the goddess in other people's eyes, felt so lonely and began to seek dangerous strength. She found a dangerous and horrible force, which appeared on this land of Assyria from nowhere. That was the power of the abyss. The queen's strange behavior was discovered, and people realized that their queen was seeking an evil power. This is not possible. The queen must be perfect. How can she touch the devil's power? They didn't want to admit that the perfect queen had degenerated. At the call of the high priest at that time, the people of the kingdom launched a rebellion against the queen, and finally killed the queen in the palace, which was the forerunner of the forgotten ruins. Is there no star bridge in this world? After reading the book, Yunshi could easily see the defects of this world. The perfect queen, from beginning to end, had not found a husband that matched her, which seemed to be the beginning of all tragedies. If there were star bridges in this world, such tragedies would be impossible, because the star bridges connected endless gods' domains. If the Queen of Assyria couldn't find a lover in her kingdom, she could simply leave her world and witness the infinite splendid scenery of the endless gods' domains. In that case, the tragedy wouldn't happen. She continued to read, and started the second banned book. The Murdered Queen. The tragedy didn't end with the death of the Queen. Rather, the real tragedy began at the time when the Queen died. The soldiers, priests, and knights who killed the Queen thought they had saved the kingdom. They buried the Queen's body in the church, trying to let the Queen rest in peace with the power of God. However, the Queen couldn't rest in peace. From that day on, there would always be people in the palace to see the Queen wearing a white wedding dress and wandering in the ancient palace. She didn't say anything, just wept softly, looking at the palace she once loved and the kingdom she had sworn to protect. Her tears turned into blood and stained the ground of the palace, little by little. The horrified knights attacked the ghost Queen, but all the attacks were ineffective. The guilt of killing the Queen drove the knights who were loyal to the Queen crazy one after another. Half of them committed suicide in the palace, and the other escaped. This kingdom was the territory of one of the knights who left the Assyrian palace. As a sinner for killing the Queen, he eventually chose to commit suicide, leaving behind only the order of guarding the ruins. The rudiment of this kingdom was born out of this order. Knights, priests, and any people who remained in the palace died one after another, and people were afraid to flee the palace, avoiding the weeping ghost of the Queen. It lasted for 1 month after the Queen's death. That night, the blood moon was hanging high above the palace. The lonely Queen appeared on the high observatory and threw her own corolla at the blood moon. No one knew what happened afterward. All the records people found that remained in the ruins ended that night forever. The kingdom of Assyria was completely destroyed. All the people in the city died, nor did any other living creatures survive. The history of Assyria ended overnight. The survivors eventually gathered in this remote land and struggled to rebuild the country. Is this the monster in the ruins? She finally had a clear understanding of the ruins. The Curse of the Bride. After the Assyria kingdom was turned into ruins, adventurers entered the ruins from time to search for the lost treasures of the ancient Assyrian kingdom. Most of them lost their lives forever after entering. But there were also a few lucky people who survived the forgotten ruins. They had the same characteristics. All of them were unmarried women. Why? She wiped his eyes. They encountered an incredible curse in the ruins. What they saw, with their eyes, was not ruins but a beautiful kingdom that was still prosperous. In this kingdom, the kingdom was still under the perfect Queen's rule and had gone through thousands of years. Just as the world turned into 2 different parts on the day of the Queen's death, only unmarried girls could enter the dreamlike Assyria kingdom in the ruins and could bring out treasures. A girl only had such an opportunity once in her life. This was the curse of the forgotten ruins, but also a blessing. The dead queen still seemed to survive in some way in the forgotten ruins and still dominated her Assyrian kingdom. If a man entered the forgotten ruins, he would only encounter countless horrible black axe monsters. If you are a man, please don't try. Not only are there black axe monsters, but there are also 10,000 swords in the square. She gave a bitter laugh. At last, he knew where the black axe monsters were from. If he wanted to go to the dragon's nest, he must break through the Assyria queen's ruins. According to the records, she was dead, but still existed in some strange way. Only unmarried girls could enter the ruins safely. That's really puzzling. Why can't men enter there? Invisible Lands. She began to read the last banned book. This was about a strange sacrifice in the ruins. The Assyrian kingdom that existed only in the eyes of young girls had a special sacrifice, which was held by the queen. It was called the Queen's Sacrifice. The perfect queen created her people, the ghosts who dressed in blood-stained bridal gowns, always wandering around in the streets of the city. The ghosts seemed to have been waiting for something. If the girl who entered the Assyrian kingdom could catch one of the ghosts, then the girl could make a wish to the great Assyria queen. The rules of the wish: the girl ghosts had their names written in the front of their chest. The first syllable of the name of the ghost you catch must be the same as yours. The more ghosts you catch, the more flowers will appear on the bride's corolla on your head. The sacrifice will begin on the night of the bloody moon. These ghosts will not attack you, but will take the initiative to escape. You can use any method to catch these girl ghosts. The more ghosts you catch, the happier the queen will feel, and the more possibilities she will use to respond to your wishes. The wish can only be related to love. A girl who is in love will win the favor of the queen. Please seize the opportunity and make this once-in-a-lifetime wish. What's the matter? Looking at the rules, Yunshi wondered if he had read a fake banned book. Why are the rules so romantic? Isn't that a horrible ruin? Can the horrible queen, the master of the Black Axe monsters, have such a girl's heart? Can it be real? What went wrong? Yunshi turned the last book over and over again, wondering who was kidding him. Compared with the previous bloody banned books, this book was so sweet that it was almost as pure as a fairy tale. Not only so, but there were also notes about this incredible bridal sacrifice in the books, which were from the girls who experienced the sacrifice. Why? Why does the ghost bride whose initial is T run so fast? I almost caught it, but it suddenly teleported away. No, I'll never give up hope until the last moment. To make my love come true, I have to rely on the ghost brides. From an unmarried village girl. The ghost bride whose initial is L doesn't run fast, but as long as it is illuminated, it will disappear into foam. If you want to catch these kind of ghost brides, you'd better go to the cemetery, the underground river, or any other places without light. Very well, my guess was correct. I didn't waste 16 years of hard work, and I finally caught one. My wish has come true. All girls with the same name as me, if you want to realize your wish, please exercise the skill Mind's Eye. From an unknown girl with a bow. There are many kinds of ghost brides, and ghost brides whose initial is W, is absolutely the most terrible one. They will pretend to be ordinary girls, crying alone in dark corners. Once they are found, they will make terrible screams, shock your soul and destroy your spirit. If you want to capture Ghost Bride W, you must have an iron will to resist the scream before you have the chance to take the next step. Don't be deceived by their weak appearance. They are very powerful unknowns. You have to bet all your beliefs in order to get the chance to be favored by the queen. The queen only smiles at the winner. From an unknown night girl. Well, there were even living experiences who had written strategy guides. If this wasn't anyone kidding around in the banned book, it would mean that the Queen of Assyria was really continuing this sacrifice. She's got way too much free time. Yunshi began to think about the truths recorded in the banned book. He still had many doubts, especially about the record of the blood month period. How could it be so simple for such a strong queen to be killed by knights and priests? After 300 years of life, the queen obviously surpassed the boundaries of human beings. Even if she was facing an army of millions, she would probably be the one who had the last laugh. How did such a powerful queen get killed by her subordinates? What happened on the night of the blood moon? Why are only Black Axe monsters hovering around in the ruins now? There are too many mysteries that the banned books could answer. The authors of the banned books seemed to have compiled the outline of the tragedy from a few records left over from the ruins and some dictations of the original royal family. What on earth did the queen do? There was no way that the authors could know. As with the name of this dragon, it was the master of the desert, it was the king of sand and dust. Among the 4 heavenly kings, it had the greatest attack range, as well as the indestructible defense, dragon scales. It was not unusual for it to attack the kingdom from time to time. It would like to take a walk after dinner to show off its strength to the people in the city. However, during this walk after dinner, there appeared a little insect that didn't know how to read the mood. It could pat such a small insect into meat sauce with one claw. Facing the dragon's claw directly, Yunshi stepped on the twin swords and rotated around 720 degrees and flew directly from below the dragon's claw to the side of the claw. This skill was practiced in the Forgotten Ruins. In order to avoid the ubiquitous and invisible attacks, he had racked his brains and tried all means. Although he was still killed over 100 times, it was not meaningless to practice this skill. Compared with the invisible attacks, Desert Dragon Zaka's claw attack was too easy to dodge. Seeing Yunshi avoid its claw, Zaka was slightly surprised. How long has it been since I saw people who could fly freely in the sky and avoid my attack? Aren't human beings just some weak insects who only know to hide inside the magic shield that covers the entire city? Without the magic shield, he would have destroyed the city and leveled everything else. Desert Dragon Zaka roared. 1, 2, 3, 4. A total of 4 gravel-colored, giant dragon eyes appeared in the east, south, west, and north regions. Each dragon eye was about 4 meters high, suspended in the air, and was surrounded by thick dust. It was a dragon language magic, Sand Dragon's Eye. The 4 dragon's eyes could let it observe the environment without any dead corners, while automatically expanding the area of yellow sand to cover 10 kilometers diameter. In this area of yellow sand, dust storms never stop and would automatically call out a large number of desert monsters. Boom! Giant sandworms over 100 meters in length billowed out of the earth and opened their round mouths. In the huge mouths, there were countless creepy jagged mouthparts and poisonous, corrosive salivas. Undoubtedly, these sandworms were at the hero rank. They were Desert Dragon Zaka's minions. As long as Zaka summoned them, they would appear. For 10 kilometers around Desert Dragon Zaka, the ground had all turned into a desert. It was a phenomenon triggered by the dragon language magic, which was far beyond human imaginations. Strong, Yunshi had a profound experience of the dragon's power. The dragon was apparently not at the hero rank, but hero-ranked human beings could never be a match for it, because hero-ranked human beings could never cause such a phenomenon with their powers. Sandstorm Star. After summoning its minions, Desert Dragon Zaka immediately used another magic. In the endless sandstorms, a huge sand ball more than 1 kilometer in diameter appeared in the sky, in the center of the 4 dragons' eyes. Every second, countless sand grains were sucked into the sand ball, increasing the strength of the giant sand ball. Its attack power may not be as fatal as the invisible attacks in the ruins, but it was easier to give people an intuitive impression. Such attacks were natural disasters, unavoidable and unstoppable. Stupid human, who gave you the courage to challenge the great desert dragon Zaka? Zaka looked down at Yunshi, and the giant sand ball locked on the city. It's time for humans to realize the fear of being dominated by dragons. When the Assyria kingdom still existed, mankind once had a covenant of peace with the dragon race. The dragon race acknowledged the supremacy of Assyria. As long as the queen of Assyria still ruled the kingdom, the dragon would not enter the mainland. But it was already a thing of the past. The queen, who was supposed to rule mankind, had hidden in the forgotten ruins. Human beings had destroyed their most glorious era personally. Now, it is the era of the dragon race. Humans, feel the power of the sandstorm star, feel the power of the dragon race. Long live my emperor! Fall, Sandstorm Star. With the pride of the dragon race, the desert dragon raised its head and ordered the giant sandstorm star that had been formed. The huge sand ball, which was about 1 kilometer in diameter, began to roll irresistibly towards the city not far away. The transparent eggshell covering the city began to deform, little by little, under the bombardment of the giant sandstorm star. The horrible weight of the sandstorm star was fatal to all magic shields. It could crush almost all magic structures. Just as Zaka was triumphantly preparing to crush the magic shield of the city, its head suddenly suffered a sharp pain. It felt as if a sharp needle had suddenly penetrated its head. With an anguished scream, Zaka couldn't control his magic and the sandstorm star instantaneously and completely disintegrated. The pained desert dragon couldn't even maintain its flying posture. It fell directly from the air and then rolled over on the ground. Bang! Yunshi was blown away by the strong airflow. He could hardly keep his balance on the twin swords and was swept in by the dust storms around him. Yes, its defense isn't unbreakable. It wasn't the crane wing's twin swords which hit Zaka's head, but Yunshi's hands. Precisely speaking, it was a fighting skill he learned from teacher Cassina, Soft Water Palm. This was a fighting skill Cassina specially created for her disciples who had the talent of soft body. Only the owner of soft body could use this fighting skill. Dripping water can wear through stone. Just like the waves that wash up on reefs, those waves seem to leave no damage to the reefs, but in fact, the force of water has penetrated the reefs. Hard reefs will eventually be completely worn down by the waves, and soft water palm speeds up this process by tens of millions of times. It was specially created for destroying the internal structures of the creatures who had strong outside defenses. Yunshi recently experimented with its effect with the Black Axe monsters in the Forgotten Ruins. As a result, the attacks of his hands could easily break through the Black Axe monsters' bodies. Now, this fighting skill had also worked on Zaka's body as well. As long as he could break through Zaka's defense, he had the possibility of winning. Compared with the invisible weapons in the Forgotten Ruins, Desert Dragon Zaka was stronger, but it was easier to deal with. "You damn little bug!" Zaka shook its dizzy head and roared. It staggered to his feet, ready to use the magic sandstorm star again. Yunshi wouldn't let go of his opponent's carelessness. From the battle god seed, countless fighting experiences of Cassina the battle god flowed into his brains. They were the experiences of a legend-ranked fighter. Plus Yunshi's own talent, the effect was far better than 1+1. Regarding the twin swords as a point of borrowing strength, Yunshi placed both feet on them with all his strength. Quicksilver motion. Compared with the flying of the twin swords, such a straight-line impact was faster and more powerful. The desert dragon had just staggered trying to raise its head. Taking advantage of this, Yunshi stepped on its wing. Boom! His palms bombarded the wing. As if the superphysical and magic defense of the dragon race didn't exist, without reservation, Yunshi's palms tore apart the nerves of the dragon's wing. Ah! The desert dragon once again toppled down on the ground and finally had to pay attention to this annoying insect. Even if this human was a small insect, it was a fierce flying insect with sharp teeth. The injury on its head plunged it into vertigo of about 5 seconds. The wound on the wing made one of its wings break completely and lost its ability to fly in the sky. Of course, these injuries were only temporary for the dragon, who had enormous vitality. They could be easily recovered after it used its own healing ability. However, the truth of it was hurt by a small insect itself had represented the abnormality of this small insect. Ordinary human beings, even if it was a hero-ranked human being, couldn't do any harm to a dragon, unless the human was holding a sacred sword or demon sword. Dragon scales were inherently immune to all physical and magical attacks. Even if a dragon was besieged by millions of people, it wasn't possible to hurt the dragon. Yunshi's attack was different. The impact of the soft water palm penetrated the dragon scale directly and directly hit the dragon's weak points straightly. "My minions, kill this little bug," the desert dragon shouted. Boom! Countless sandworms dug out of the ground, and giant scorpions emerged from the dust. Crap! Yunshi could see 1, 2, 3 red dots appearing beside him, which were the beacons released by the giant scorpions' deep red tails. In the next second, several dark red rays passed by Yunshi. Only one of them touched Yunshi's shoulder, but its damage was powerful, leaving a burning scar on his shoulder. Oh! The sandworms got excited and chirped. Their huge bodies surrounded Yunshi from all sides, making the situation on the battlefield reverse in an instant. The desert was the home of Desert Dragon Zaka. Above the yellow sand, it was the master of this land. Just one hit and Yunshi was plunged into a deadly crisis. How could he survive in such a situation? Shuffle. With a flash of the cold light, a sword cut off the tail of a giant poisonous scorpion without warning. A beautiful white rose bloomed on a sandworm's back, spread out in the next second and blown up the giant sandworm's waist. Yunshi looked up and saw familiar faces. Xiao Cao's expressionless face. Hua Yu's smiling face. And the faces of all the members of the Starwing Knights. The Starwing Knights were taking part in the war. The Starwing Knights. It's the prince and his knights. We have hope. The appearance of the Starwing Knights greatly inspired the morale of the people in the city. As mortals, they couldn't fight against a real dragon, The only thing they could do was to pray for the prince and the Starwing Knights. Glory, turn into my shield and my sword. In the name of the White Golden Rose, Starwing Knights, move out. As the owner of one of the noblest bloodlines in the Night God's domain, Hua Yu finally showed the extraordinary power of her White Golden Rose bloodline. Unlike Xiao Cao, Hua Yu brought together all the forces of the Starwing Knights. The attack that shattered the giant sandworm's body just now was the masterpiece of all the members of the Starwing Knights. The entire Starwing Knights rushed into the battlefield like a storm, showing no fear. This was also the first time that She had seen the real combat ability of the Starwing Knights. Defensive formation. White Golden Shield. After blowing up a giant sandworm, Hua Yu raised the sword in her hand, and all the members of the Starwing Knights were concentrated behind her. All the knights' breath almost merged into one. Several red dots appeared on Hua Yu's body, and then the dark red ray attack reappeared. She's heart beat fast. The death ray could kill most hero-ranked beings in seconds. Could Hua Yu dodge it? Fortunately, the deep red ray was blocked by a transparent shield with white golden color halfway. The shield engraved with the mark of the cross and the rose emblem was precisely a secret art from the Night God's domain, the White Golden Shield. The White Golden Shield was shaped by all the strength of the girls of the Starwing Knights. This was the special secret art of the Night God's domain. An excellent leader of the Knights could concentrate all of the force of the Knight members and display all kinds of incredible secret arts. The power of the secret art depends on two factors: the talent and the will of the leader of the Knights. The trust of the members of the Knights for their leader. For the Starwing Knights, both factors were perfect. Hua Yu's talent and will were absolutely first class. She was undoubtedly a genius. The members of the Starwing Knights had 100% confidence in Hua Yu, and among the members of the Starwing Knights, there were special bonds that other people couldn't imagine. With Mai's blessing, seed, the tacit understanding amongst the girls of the Starwing Knights was enough to make any other knights feel inferior. Raise your swords. Charge. The protection of the White Golden Shield was almost invincible. Although there was a time limit, it was still a secret art that was enough to subvert the situation on the battlefield. Splash. Another giant poisonous scorpion had its tail cut off and its blood sprayed 10 meters high. We won. We won. The dragon escaped away. The guards on the walls of the city were the first to shout the glad tidings. With their message, many people hiding in their basements, churches, and even palaces began to walk up the walls and witness the battlefield after the battle between the Starwing Knights and the Desert Dragon. It wasn't until they saw for themselves that the Desert Dragon had left and that there were still mutilated bodies of monsters lying on the ground, that they believed that the disaster of the kingdom had finally been diverted. The dragon was completely repulsed. At this moment, nobody cared that the dragon was only one of the 4 heavenly kings, one of the minions of the real dragon. All they knew was that the prince and the Starwing Knights had won. Soon, the cheers rang throughout the sky, and people ran out of the city gate one by one, watching the bodies of giant scarlet scorpions and sandworms. Have we really won? Not only these ordinary people, but the members of the Starwing Knights also showed an incredulous look on their faces. When did they become so strong? Not long ago, many of them were still ordinary first-ranked swordswomen. But now, they could already frighten away a dragon. Yes, we won. Hua Yu showed a confident and sunny smile. How can they win? Because the Starwing Knights trusted a man and had the consciousness of sacrificing their lives to protect him. Their prince was the core that connected all of them together. Any teams with such a firm belief could be strong. Without firm beliefs, in the face of giant sandworms and poisonous scorpions, the number of people was only number. It couldn't be turned into combat power. Only by adhering to their own inner will and willingness to pay all costs for it, can the White Golden Shield shine brightly and let the beautiful rose open. The Starwing Knights will certainly become stronger. 1, 2, 3, Xiao Cao counted the bodies of poisonous scorpions on the ground. As a girl from an ordinary family, careful calculation was her instinct. Before she reached the hero rank, she often didn't have the money to repair her equipment. She used the newbie iron sword for a long time until she joined the Starwing Knights. After joining the Starwing Knights, although she became much richer, the belief that waste is shameful had long been incorporated into her mind. No matter which world she was in, this belief wouldn't change. Well, the body won't disappear. Yunshi curiously watched the girls of the Starwing Knights cut off and carry the bodies of giant poisonous scorpions. He found the decisive difference between this battle and the battle in the Forgotten Ruins. In the Forgotten Ruins, the monsters he killed would leave corpses, but these corpses would soon be revived by the mysterious Queen of Assyria. However, the minions of the Desert Dragon didn't seem to have this characteristic. These bodies wouldn't suddenly revive and attack the people nearby them. It seemed that the Desert Dragon didn't have a relationship with the Queen of the Forgotten Ruins. This also meant that the Queen of the Forgotten Ruins was probably stronger than the Desert Dragon Zaka. Maybe she was also one of the 4 Heavenly Kings? If the 4 Heavenly Kings were ranked according to their strength, Yunshi felt that Desert Dragon Zaka was probably the weakest. Come on, everybody, the meat of these monsters are useful. Eating them can improve our physiques. Xiao Cao stood on a scorpion's tail and commanded all the members of the Starwing Knights to carry the whole body of the scorpion. At the same time, the palace armies also arrived on the battlefield at last. They cut the giant sandworm's body with ready tools and cut it into hundreds of half-meter chunks of meat. Like what Xiao Cao said, whether in the infinite god's domains or in this world, the bodies of these monsters were rare treasures. Just like no matter how rich you were, you couldn't buy the meat of male fiery dragon, the meat of the sandworms and scorpions couldn't be bought in the mortal world. The taste of the meat was a secondary consideration. The enormous energy contained in the meat was the most important. Even so, the girls of the Starwing Knights were curious about how the monsters tasted. I haven't eaten the meat of a giant sandworm yet. I want to know how it tastes. Isn't this scorpion poisonous? Can its meat be eaten? Well, what's the flavor? Chicken or beef? Ling Ling was deeply troubled. According to the records, the meat of giant sandworms is delicious, and the protein is more than 10 times that of ordinary beef. After eating, our endurance to high temperatures would be strengthened. It's a very rare food ingredient. Because giant sandworms generally live in the desert, hundreds of meters below the ground, it's difficult for humans to find and kill this kind of monster. Their meat is very expensive. Mai Lan recited the knowledge she remembered from books, satisfying the curiosity of other members of the Starwing Knights. Yeah, 10 times better than beef. I thought the roasted veal steak was the best thing in the world. It's great that the meat contains so much protein. My mother always said that my chest flat is because of undernourishment. If I eat the sandworm's meat, can my breasts grow again? Mai Lan, is that the same with the poisonous scorpions? Mai Lan pushed the glasses on her nose and nodded. The scorpion is poisonous, but the poison is confined to the scorpion's tail. Therefore, after we cut off its tail, its meat can be eaten. I heard it tastes like chicken. When the Starwing Knights and the royal army returned to the city, the main road of the city was crowded with people. Many people who saw the spoils of the Starwing Knights and the prince, and they cheered loudly by the road. Long live the prince! Long live the Starwing Knights! Let the evil dragon die! As long as there is our prince and the Starwing Knights, we don't have to be afraid of dragons anymore. Yunshi sighed as he listened to people's excited cheers. It's better not to let people know the truth. Only he knew how terrible the evil dragon's nest was. The master of the Forgotten Ruins, the Queen of Assyria, as long as she was there, even if with the help of the Starwing Knights, he had no hope to break through the Forgotten Ruins, not to mention the dragon's nest. Compared with the Queen of Assyria, Desert Dragon Zaka was just the weakest of the 4 heavenly kings. Moreover, even though the Desert Dragon was defeated by himself and the Starwing Knights, it still didn't show enough terror. If it wasn't for the Starwing Knights, he would have been defeated and would have to watch the dragon destroying the city. The Dragon War had only opened its prelude. Prince, are you worried about our fighting capacity? The bloody robin appeared again behind the worried Yunshi. Unlike the blindly optimistic people, She also saw the tragic future of the kingdom by observing Desert Dragon Zaka's life trajectory. Even though the Starwing Knights had unlimited potential, that potential was still just potential, and it would take time for them to become stronger and stronger. But now, this kingdom had no time to wait for the Starwing Knights to grow up. As a palace augur and a member of the Starwing Knights, like Yunshi, she was aware of the crisis for the future of the kingdom. Yes, the Starwing Knights are not strong enough to break through the Forgotten Ruins. Do you have any ideas? Yunshi looked at the mysterious augur with a glimmer of hope in his heart and his eyes. In the battle before, Robin's damage to the Desert Dragon was the greatest. Even Yunshi didn't find out how she blew out one of Desert Dragon Zaka's eyes. It can be said that Robin had made the greatest contribution to the battle before. The future can be changed. There is only one hope for the kingdom. Prince, come with me. Robin used the magic unknown realm and disappeared with Yunshi from the parade, leaving the Starwing Knights. Oh, they sneaked away. Ling Ling noticed their disappearance and muttered with dissatisfaction. She's supposed to discuss the next plan with the prince. Who are you chose to believe in Robin? Inside the palace, in Yunshi's room, under the ceiling engraved with the sun, moon, mountains, and rivers, Robin opened a map half the size of a person. Prince, do you really want to defeat the dragon and save the kingdom? Robin needed to identify this problem before she explained her plan. All subsequent plans must be based on this premise. If Yunshi didn't like this idea and have a fearless will, there was no way that they could accomplish the plan. Yes, I must defeat the dragon. I have to win. This was the main quest of this trial. It must be accomplished in any case. What would happen if he failed to accomplish the main quest? Yunshi dared not think about it. His instincts told him that it must be a terrible thing. Well, let's look at this mark on the map first. Robin nodded. Yes, that was the will. Having a firm will may not be the necessary condition for victory, but it was absolutely a great advantage. Those who had no confidence in themselves were not qualified to be favored by the goddess of victory. Yunshi looked closely at the map. It was the world map of this trial world. On the map, the area in the eastern half corner was marked by sword and shield, and a castle pattern was erected in the center of the area. Undoubtedly, this was the only human kingdom on this continent. After the collapse of the Assyrian kingdom, this kingdom was the last fortress and hope of mankind. This area was marked in white. In contrast, the central part of the mainland, from the most central to the north and western regions, were all marked in dark red. The center of the region was a mysterious place surrounded by ruins with a dragon-shaped imprint. Dragon's Nest. This was Yunshi's ultimate goal. The evil dragon already occupies 2/3 of the continent. Yunshi didn't expect that the only continent of this trial world had long ceased to belong to human beings. Compared with the land dominated by the evil dragon, human beings were simply hanging on with the last of life in the border area. Yes, it's no problem to say that the continent has been ruled by the evil dragon. But, Prince, take a closer look at the southern area. Robin took Yunshi's hand and led him to a strange place. It wasn't the white of the kingdom, nor the red of the evil dragon. It was red and white. Why are there white and red here? Yunshi looked at the unknown area in surprise. Because this region has both the remnants of human beings and the forces of the evil dragon. It is the only region on the mainland that is still in a war. Are humans fighting dragons in this region? Looking at the red and white color, Yunshi had a vague intuition. He felt as if there was something calling him. Yes, they haven't lost yet, because they have special tactics and means to fight the dragon. They are not like our kingdom, because they are the people who inherited the civilization of the ancient Assyrian kingdom and choose witches as their religion. Prince, you must obtain the special power of witches. Only in this case will you have the hope to overcome the Forgotten Ruins. Only they know how to face the dead queen of Assyria. Because they are the cursed twins who inherited the last blood of the ancient Assyrian kingdom. The twin witches of fate. The twin witches, the witches of fate. Without thinking, Yunshi could guess who the twin witches were. White Lotus and Red Lotus. The side quest The Legendary Witches was exactly tailored for them. Yes, Prince, if you want to defeat the evil dragon, they are indispensable people. But before that, there's one more important thing to do. Robin's face looked serious. That's the most serious problem in the kingdom right now. What's more serious than the evil dragon? Yunshi looked at the mysterious palace augur in confusion. That's naturally your identity, my prince. Robin picked up a crystal ball in her hand. Her face was covered by her bright red cloak, and the atmosphere became strange in an instant. My identity? Am I not the prince of this kingdom? Yunshi remembered that this was the setting of this star trial. Judging from the fact that the Starwing Knights were trusted by the people of the city and people's worship to him, he was indeed the prince of this kingdom in people's hearts. Yes, you are undoubtedly our prince, and this is the biggest problem. Because, my prince, you are only a prince now. Like speaking a tongue twister, Robin said the biggest problem. I'm a prince. What's wrong with this? Yunshi became more and more confused. My prince, it means that you are not the most powerful person in this kingdom. That is to say, you are only the successor of this kingdom. The real master of this kingdom is not you, but the king. Robin pointed out the key point. Ah, I have a father. Only then did Yunshi realized what Robin meant. Indeed, if he is a prince, it means that there is a king in this kingdom. In the past, he always fought alone, so it didn't matter what the background setting was. However, compared with the previous trials, his identity in this trial seemed to be somewhat different. Yes, the king has been ill for a long time. My prince, you are only performing the king's duties to administer the kingdom. This is a problem that must be solved. The bloody Robin had witnessed countless human tragedies, however, she must say this. She sighed and continued, the king is not an incompetent king, but it's not his time now. My prince, it's time for you to make a decision. Decision? What decision? Yunshi still didn't understand what Robin hinted. We are facing the evil dragon's threat, we need you, but we don't need a sick king. My prince, Robin looked at Yunshi in peace. Hasn't the prince understood it yet? He is an excellent prince and the hope of the kingdom's future. Compared with the old king, he is the real master of this kingdom. Now, facing the enormous threat of the evil dragon, he must truly ascend the throne and become the righteous master of the kingdom. For this reason, the best solution is to let the long disqualified king disappear. From the trajectory of fate, she saw the future of this kingdom, in which the old king didn't have a place. No, I don't have that plan. Eventually, Yunshi realized what Robin's hint was. He was neither able to cry or laugh. He was the prince of this kingdom, but it was just a setting. Although the king could only play a mascot of this kingdom, there was no need to kill him. What he did was to find a way to kill the evil dragon, not to play a royal theater called patricide. By the way, Robin, are you really not playing the role of a villainess? What a third-rate script your suggestion is. My prince, you are a kind man, but the world is not as beautiful as you think. Robin shook her head and said something to Yunshi's surprise. Go and see the king. Maybe you can understand why I suggested that. That king has gone the wrong way. No matter how hard Yunshi thought, he couldn't remember a thing about the king. For him, the king's sense of existence wasn't stronger than the trees in the dark forest. How could he remember the shape of a random tree in the dark forest? But according to Robin's proposal, he still came to the garden where the king was supposed to convalesce. It doesn't look very good. What Yunshi saw was doctors in black long clothes with beak-like masks on their faces. They were busy shuttling through the garden. In the air, there was an overwhelming smell of medicines. Parfum. The emerald jelly came out of Yunshi's chest and made an uncomfortable sound. Gah! Doctors in black clothes looked at Yunshi with lifeless eyes and made a threatening voice. I am the prince. Yunshi had to declare his identity. Gah! The doctor's eyes turned red. I am the prince. Yunshi declared his identity again. He was the successor of this kingdom and the current regent. Although this was just a setting, it should be useful in this trial world. Gah! There were crows crying, and more doctors in black clothes appeared, looking at Yunshi with bloody eyes. No, the script is wrong. Why do they have that bloody smell? Yunshi smelled that the doctors in black clothes had exactly the same smell as those black axe monsters in the Forgotten Ruins. Gah! Gah! Under the black beak-like masks, one sharp mouth after another opened, showing a chilling expression. Sickle. Fork. Jigsaw. Those doctors in black took out something that should never be used by doctors one by one and surrounded Yunshi. They looked so enthusiastic, like some hospitable hosts who were welcoming the most honored visitor had finally arrived at the door. You're looking for your own death. Yunshi noticed a bonfire in the middle of the garden, which looked so familiar. This meant that this area was the same as the Forgotten Ruins. It was a barrier he had to break through. Recalling Robin's hint, Yunshi had no doubt who the ultimate boss of this area is. Damn it, why is her prediction so accurate? Now he really had to be the protagonist of a third-rate royal theatre of patricide. Ding! The crane wings' twin swords circled in the air, turning into two flying streamers above the battlefield, which was originally a garden. Bang! A doctor in black's whole body exploded. You are dead. Yunshi, who took away his palm. He didn't even look at the doctor in black and sheathed the crane wings' twin sword. After being blown up, the doctor in black slowly stood up in an eerie manner. It was clear that his heart had been pierced, but the hole in his heart was being filled up with black granules. This was a kind of parasite that Yunshi didn't know, parasitizing on the human body. It could greatly increase the vitality of the body and could even repair fatal injuries. However, in the face of Yunshi's soft water palm, these parasites could do less use. Before the dense granulations could repair the monster's heart, they had all suddenly burst into a bloodstain. Yunshi's soft water palm could even break Desert Dragon Zaka's defense. How could these parasites withstand it? Shuffle. The twin swords drew smooth tracks in the air and three black doctor monsters' heads had been cut off. After losing their heads, these monsters didn't die immediately but exposed their true faces. It was a black wireworm that emerged from the wound on the neck and replaced the function of the cut-off head. Why are there these disguising parasites in the garden? Yunshi looked at these weird monsters in a very bad mood. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Here came that sound again, the whisper of death. Wasn't this the patent of the Queen of Assyria? The monster whose head was replaced by black wireworms fell completely into a state of insanity after hearing the sound, rushing madly towards Yunshi. As I said, you're looking for your own death. Yunshi took a long breath and put his hands up and down on his right side. Unlike the soft water palm he just used, this time, he was going to use a rigid body skill Cassina taught him. Boom, 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 boom. The deafening sound of blood flew in Yunshi's body and resounded in his ears, like the torrent of rivers and like the surging of waves. At this moment, the blood in Yunshi's body was flowing 10 times faster than that of ordinary people. Only with a diamond-like unbreakable body, a human could withstand this rigid body skill and not commit suicide. Its name, Thunderbolt. Ha! Gathering all the chi of his body into his hands, a ball of incandescent rotating light emerged. As if thunder was exploding, a circle of shockwaves was released and all the black monsters around Yunshi were blown away, and then the light ball in Yunshi's hand flew out. Boom! 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 The light ball turned into a continuous burst of light circles, blasting all the monsters in front of Yunshi into pieces. No matter how strong their self-healing power was, after being blasted to ashes, there was no way they could revive. Soft water palm embodied the destructive power of soft. Thunderbolt demonstrated the destructive power of rigid. Only a freak who had both rigid body and soft body could master these two super fighting skills before even reaching the hero rank. After releasing the Thunderbolt, Yunshi took a deep breath. Anyone who saw the power of Thunderbolt would be shocked, including Yunshi himself. This was the first time that he had really used the rigid body skill he learned on the battlefield, and the result was apparently outstanding. Compared with the silent and lethal attacks of the soft body, the attacks of the rigid body were all straight and fierce. Well, soft body skills are suited for one-on-one fights, and rigid body skills are suited for battlefields. Yunshi had more insight into the characteristics of his body. The two physiques were distinct, but once he could combine the two physiques together, their effect opened up a new world for him. However, Yunshi was still far from combining the rigid body and the soft body together. Whether it was the soft water palm or the thunderbolt, he could only use them separately. Gah! After about 90% of the members were eliminated by Yunshi's thunderbolt, he quickly wiped out the remaining doctors in black by the twin swords. These doctors in black were apparently weaker than the black axe monsters in the Forgotten Ruins. The black parasites in their bodies gave them strong power and fast speed, but they didn't grant them killing skills. If the black axe monsters were elites, then these doctors in black were just the weakest monsters Yunshi had ever seen. Did I start in the wrong order? Looking at the monsters, Yunshi began to suspect that he had used the wrong strategy to pass this trial. Basing on the difficulty, obviously, this garden was a novice area, and the Forgotten Ruins was the final area where the ultimate boss was. Ah! 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 You're here. A hysterical voice echoed in the dark garden, my unfilial son. Well, Yunshi thought that he knew who the master of the voice was. Why? Why did I give birth to such a rebellious son like you? I am the king of this kingdom. I'm the supreme ruler. The king roared. From his voice, Yunshi couldn't feel any traces of ill. Your Majesty, are you really sick? Aren't you full of spirits? I curse you. You animal. How dare you want to kill your father and marry your mother? Wait. What kind of crime is this? I didn't do anything. You are slandering me. Even a third-rate novelist doesn't write such a story nowadays. You must die. You and the Starwing Knights you formed will be buried by me. This kingdom is my kingdom, my thing. The king who should have died long ago, shouted with a voice so loud that Yunshi wondered if he was really sick. I'm sorry, but I don't want to do so. Yunshi had no will to be such a prince. He was coming to fight the dragon, not to play in this family ethics drama. The identity prince was worthless in his eyes. No matter how Robin advised him to murder the king and ascend to the throne of the kingdom, Yunshi himself wasn't interested in it at all. But that's what he thought, not what the king thought. I should have strangled you in the cradle when you were born. It was the greatest mistake of my life to have pity on you for the death of your humble mother. I shouldn't have left you at that knight's house and let him raise you. Was there such a setting? My real mother is dead. Although it was only the background of the trial, Yunshi still felt a little sad to hear it. Hey, this really is a standard family ethics drama. But if my mother was dead, what did she mean to kill your father and marry your mother? I won't give her to you. She's mine. She's mine. Even if I'm in the coffin, I'll climb out and stop you. Grant me the power of eternal life, great God. The king fell into a fanatic and prayed to an ancient existence. Wow, this is. Yunshi smelled the same thing again. That invisible thing in the Forgotten Ruins. Hiss, hiss, hiss. It seemed to be a soft twittering sound, and it seemed to be the sound of bubbles breaking out of the deep sea. From the deepest part of the garden inside the palace, there came with a creepy whisper. Aga. That's it, that's the power. My unfilial son, you can never take away my kingdom and marry my bride. The king roared with great excitement, making a deafening roar. The sky became dark, and a bloody crescent moon revealed half of its body. Crescent moon? Yunshi looked at the weather worsening and recalled the huge red moon he saw in the Forgotten Ruins. Gah! 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 Under the bloody moon, more crow doctors poured out of the garden. Their eyes turned red and their moves became more hospitable. They went berserk. Yunshi was too familiar with this situation. Crane wings, twin swords. Let's fly. Soft water palm. Even though these doctors' strengths were strengthened 3 times after going berserk, they were still nothing in Yunshi's eyes. Apart from their exuberant vitality, they had nothing good. Shuffle. 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 The crane wings, twin swords flying over the crow doctors' heads. Every time the sword flashed, there would be a head flying into the sky and bursting out a pile of parasites. Bang! 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 Every attack of the soft water palm would blow up a bunch of such black parasites, ensuring that none of the doctors could revive. Kill! 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 Kill. Kill. With the support of the battle god's seed, Yunshi killed hundreds of doctors within just a dozen seconds. Yunshi didn't even leave a corpse of the doctors, not even a living parasite. Stepping in a pool of blood, Yunshi entered the palace, which used to be the core of the whole kingdom. But now, under the shining of the bloody crescent moon, the palace looked as if it had been smeared by some kind of internal organs, giving off a foul odor. Looking carefully, there were obvious biological lines on the walls, which were like living intestines, liver and lung mixed together. Anyone could see at a glance that the owner of this palace had completely degenerated. "You're here at last. Come to kill me and rob me of my most precious treasure. Come on, I'll kill you with my own hands." The king's voice became hoarse. Just listening to it, Yunshi could smell the breath of the abyss. Yunshi shook his head. That was what happened. The king he had never seen before was hopeless. Stepping on the floor of the most magnificent palace in the kingdom, the plants on both sides of the corridor were all turned into black and weird vines, which made him feel creepy, let alone the vines were still alive. Walking into this palace was like entering the interior of a terrifying creature. The deeper Yunshi walked inside, the more disgusted he felt. It even gave him a delusion that he was moving further into the abyss. Perhaps this was not a delusion. Because the owner of this palace had completely deviated and entered the darkest world. A few minutes later, stepping on the blood of crow doctors, Yunshi finally saw the man who was supposed to be his father in this world. The king who guards the kingdom is the king who inherits the blood of ancient knights. However, no one could believe that this king was once a good king. No. It was even hard to believe that the king was a living person. Sitting on that iron throne was a living corpse. The visible part of his skin was as dry and weak as a corpse that had been dried for decades. On his head, he wore a metal cage-like weird decoration. Only the knight's armor on his body, as well as the stick beside him, still retained a trace of the past fair and incorrupt king. At this moment, there was only jealousy and madness on his withered face. "My son, are you finally coming to kill me?" Well, his persecutory delusion is hopeless. "Your Majesty, you really do like to play the family ethics drama too much." "I have no interest in the throne." Although Yunshi knew that the king was already hopeless, he still thought that he needed to clarify this. "Oh, I know you don't like the throne." Surprisingly, the king seemed to know that Yunshi didn't care about the throne. "But you want my queen. She's so charming, so perfect. She's mine, nobody can take her away from me. Especially you, you bastard. I know you want to kill me and marry her." Hey, I don't even know who the queen is. Don't accuse me of this. In this world, I will never do any things unrelated to slaying the evil dragon. Her snow-white skin, her smart eyes, her lovely, innocent appearance. I fell in love with her at first sight. I love her more than anyone else. You want to steal her from me? Then I will kill you first. A great deal of black air rose from the king, and the sacred knight armor began to take on an ominous color. "I curse you, curse why you are so young, so energetic. My kingdom, my queen, are all mine, mine. I will never give them to you. Unforgivable, unforgivable, unforgivable. Accept the judgment from the king, the sinner who wants to kill his father and marry his mother." The king stood up. The long withered body was infected by some weird breath and became strong and powerful again. Black parasites swam out of his corpse-like eyes, declaring that the king had become a real monster. When he was still alive, he was a real hero-ranked knight. Now, infected by strange forces, he had stepped further into an unknown field. He has a set of god weapons. He is a strong enemy. This was what the battle god's seed told Yunshi. The contaminated armor and stick were the parts of the set of god weapons, sacred revenge. It was the legacy of the first king of the kingdom and had been handed down from generation to generation to protect the kingdom. After thousands of years, it had been recognized by the people of the kingdom as a powerful god weapon. When the king was still a human, he was not just a king but also a famous knight. This was the characteristic of the kingdom. Every king would inevitably inherit the sacred revenge and watch the ruins of the Assyrian kingdom. However, the last watcher, the master of the sacred revenge himself, had degenerated. Because of this, the sacred revenge also lost its glory and became a dark-type god weapon. Gaining back his power, the king jumped into the air and struck the stick down at Yunshi. The black stick smashed on the ground, causing the ground to break. The rippling shock wave even smashed the wall several dozen meters away. The position directly hit by the stick collapsed suddenly and became an area covered by ominous black air. Too fast. Yunshi barely dodged the attack and his heart started to beat fast. After being infected, the king was really strong. Ha! The king bent his right leg and gave Yunshi a side kick. Bang! Yunshi's body twisted unnaturally, which avoided the heavy kick. It was the characteristic of the soft body. Ha! The king once again kicked Yunshi's waist. Hey, you're a knight. What don't you use your stick? You're only relying on your foot. Unexpectedly, Yunshi couldn't avoid a kick and had to withstand the kick. Ha! The king kicked again. Bang! Yunshi's soft water palm punched the king's leg again. His soft water palm could stun a dragon, but caused no effect on the king's black leg. He did hit the king's leg, but after penetrating into the king's body, he couldn't find anything to destroy. Yunshi felt as if his palm hit on a decayed coffin with nothing inside. Ha! The king was totally unaffected by Yunshi's soft water palm and stretched out his leg, and Yunshi was forced to take a step back. Undoubtedly, the king's kick skill had been practiced to the limit. Ha! Ha! The king's side kicks seemed to never stop, giving Yunshi no chance to take a break. In this case, Yunshi's soft water palm completely lost any effects, and he could only rely on the characteristics of the rigid body to bear the hurt. Your kicks just don't stop, hum? Then I'll kick too. Taste my side kick. Ha! Side kick. Ha! Side kick. Only then did Yunshi and the king reveal a style that seemed to be closely related. Foot versus foot. Rigid body versus sacred revenge. After a while, both of them realized that if this continued, neither of them could take any advantages. They changed their skills almost at the same time. Aha! The king swung up his stick and roared. 3 black turtle shell-like obscurities appeared above his head. Taste this. Thunderbolt. Yunshi rolled back, put his hands up and down, and breathed in as much air as he could. A strong whirlpool of air diffused around Yunshi, continuously releasing the unique aura of the rigid body. Gathering the strength of his whole body to a point, Yunshi released a thunderbolt from his hands without hesitation. Yunshi wondered if it was his delusion, because he saw a contemptuous smile on the king's withered face. A burning flash burst in the middle of the palace, and the 3 turtle shells that rotated above the king's head disappeared at the same time. In the next second, Yunshi was blown up by the rebounding thunderbolt's shockwave and was stunned. Taking this advantage, the king jumped up with a heavy blow, slapping his palm on Yunshi's body. Boom! Numerous black waves of light burst on Yunshi's body. He spat a mouthful of blood, even his rigid body couldn't withstand the horrible destructive force. As the ground exploded again, Yunshi's body together with the twin swords was bombed into the ground, suffering the greatest damage since the battle with the king. But it wasn't the end. My body can't move. Yunshi found that his body was full of unidentified forces similar to electric current, resulting in a short period of spasms throughout his body. He remembered the introduction of the sacred revenge he saw in the library. The sacred revenge had 2 parts. The sacred stick could release the thunder of judgment and wipe out all darkness. The revenge armor could absorb any attack and reflect it 200%. Yunshi finally knew how he lost. His thunderbolt was rebounded by the king's revenge armor and increased by 200%. Even he himself couldn't withstand thunderbolt after it was increased by 200%. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Unknown whispers hovered around Yunshi's ear, and the king raised his hand with one hand. He first flew to the sky, and the next second he fell like a meteorite. Knight's martial art, justice judgment. The fierce impact from the sky hit Yunshi accurately, penetrated his internal organs and turned his whole person into ashes and rose all over the sky. This was the fatal blow from the angry king, the justice judgment from a father. Besides the bonfire in the garden. It's really tough. Yunshi gazed at the burning bonfire and listed the mistakes he had made. First of all, he looked down upon the king's battle power. Although it looked like a corpse, it was definitely a corpse that was more powerful than the black axe monsters in the Forgotten Ruins. Secondly, he neglected the power of the sacred revenge. It could release the thunder of judgment and paralyze the target's body. Rebound all damage by 200%. Although the king had degenerated and the sacred revenge had been contaminated by the power of darkness, but the god weapon's power wasn't being weakened at all. Finally, the power that led to the king's degeneration. His body looked like a corpse, but had essentially been eroded by unknown black substances. There was no flesh and blood beneath the skin of the corpse. It seemed that human nature had disappeared from the king. When Yunshi's soft water palm penetrated into the king's body, he felt as if he was hitting on a statue with numerous holes. Soft water palm could do no harm to the king's body. Thunderbolt would be rebounded by the king's sacred revenge. Maybe the king had weaknesses when he was still a human, but now, he was completely invincible. Is he really invincible? Remembering the feeling when his soft water palm hit on the king's body, Yunshi wondered. Maybe the king still had memory and wisdom. Yunshi felt that the seemingly infatuated king had embarked on the road of no return. The power of the abyss was devouring his life. The king now was like a torch burning his soul, releasing the last light of his humanity. It was such a crazy and powerful king that Yunshi would defeat. Give it a try. Once again, with the crane wings twin swords, Yunshi stepped into the demon's palace. Ga! 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 Among the screams of crow doctors, Yunshi once again went inside the palace, which had been covered by endless internal organs. Sitting high on the iron throne, the living corpse stood up again. You're here, my unfilial son. Accept your father's verdict. This time, Yunshi carefully looked at the king's face. It wasn't his delusion. The darkness in the king's eyes had increased and the black paradises shuttling through the empty eye sockets had become more vivid. The knight's shining armor was turning into the same color as the surrounding internal organs, and the stick representing the supreme power of the kingdom was shining black runes. Sacred had lost, only revenge remained. Bomb! Without any words, the degenerated king charged towards Yunshi again. Sidekick. Sidekick. The two chose the same skills. Rigid body versus sacred revenge. The scene before was repeated. Relying on his rigid body, Yunshi didn't fear the king's sidekick at all. Since the soft water palm can do no damage, then why don't I try to use pure strength? Lava breathing? Lava skin? Iron blood? Yunshi didn't need to learn these at all. Because he himself was a rigid body, an ultimate fantasy. This was the first time that Yunshi really and truly applied this talent after he obtained it. Obviously, the opponent this time had the characteristics that were strong enough to compete with his rigid body. Although the king's wisdom, humanity, and even memory were failing, the degenerated king was indeed one of the strongest opponents Yunshi had ever encountered. Without human flesh and blood, his weaknesses as a human had also disappeared. He was more powerful and terrible than when he was a hero-ranked human knight. In some sense, the king was a monster-like opponent. No matter how he obtained the strange power and how long he could maintain it, power was still power. Yunshi couldn't make the battle become easier. This was a match of strength and strength. Boom, boom, boom. It sounded not like a battle between human beings, but rather like a natural disaster, an earthquake, or a volcanic explosion. This was the battle between two monsters. Like a blazing flame burning. Like a wild thunder running. Like the dry earth roaring. Like a whistling storm raging. Rigid body symbolized the most original and violent force in the world. Carry all before one, because the rigid body itself was the strongest and hardest substance in the world. What just hurt Yunshi's rigid body wasn't the blow of the sacred stick, but Yunshi's own thunderbolt. The king's armor of revenge could bound back everything, but it needed a special ceremony to launch it. The 3 revolving black turtle shell-like unknown objects were the signals of the launch of the king's sacred revenge. Apparently, Yunshi wouldn't step into the same trap again. Ha ha. The king used the sacred revenge again, showing a mysterious smile on his face. I won't be defeated by the same skill twice. Yunshi changed from the rigid body to the soft body. This process took a little time, but since the king was using the sacred revenge, he naturally couldn't take this advantage to attack Yunshi. With clever footsteps, Yunshi didn't retreat but directly dashed towards the king and entwined his arms around the king's neck. Sacred revenge could rebound all attacks, but it was only a linear reflection. If he was strangled to death, the sacred revenge could do no use to save his life. With both hands pressing on the king's head, Yunshi turned over in the air and rode on the king's neck. It looked like a children's play knee rides, but it was actually a true game of death. As long as the king showed a little careless, Yunshi's legs could strangle him to death. With a twist of his waist, Yunshi displayed the death-strangling skill that only humans who had soft body could perform, pulling the king's body down to the ground. Gah! The king's neck was twisted into a strange shape. Even his powerful force couldn't break away from the deadly strangulation. Instead, it became an assist force for the strangulation. If the king was still a human, the strangulation was enough to kill him. The 3 revolving turtle shell-like objects disappeared, and the time for the skill sacred revenge had passed. The king got up in rage and lifted up the stick in his hand. The stick emitted the sound of thunder, the sound of verdict. Go! Yunshi's body turned over in the air and stepped on the palace's ceiling. Switch the soft body to the rigid body. Boom! With the king's stick as the center, innumerable lights burst apart and exploded. Yunshi had switched the soft body to the rigid body. He stepped on the ceiling with both feet and put his hands in an up and down position. Oh, the sacred revenge entered its cooldown time. You can't use it now. Then take this. Thunderbolt. The same sound of thunder echoed. Only one side relied on the strength of a god weapon and the other side relied on the power of the battle god's seed. Countless electric currents broke out and the pillars that supported the palace fell one after another. In the continuous explosions, one figure was blown up into the sky while the other figure was bombed into the underground. Cough, it's still beyond imagination. Yunshi crawled up from the ruins of the palace. This time, his thunderbolt wasn't bounced back, but he was directly hit by the king's sacred verdict and his body was paralyzed for more than 3 seconds. If he was an ordinary hero-ranked being, he'd have been killed 10 times. The king was far stronger than the crow doctors. I won't admit it. I won't let you have her. She's mine. Mine. From the ruins of the palace came the mad king's roar. More black air was rising from the palace's underground. I sacrifice my legs, the great thing, give me more power. Yunshi frowned. His thunderbolt indeed hit the king's legs just now, but under the protection of the armor, the king's legs shouldn't have been broken. Why do you sacrifice your legs so simply? Is that queen that I haven't seen really so important? The blood moon shed a hazy moonlight to the king's body in response to the mad king's call. Aga! The king howled even more wildly and crawled out of the ruins. As he crawled, the armor on his feet began to be corroded and eventually turned into dust by a great stream of black air. Yunshi could even see one black hole after another appeared on the king's grey-black body as if an invisible flame was burning his body. After losing his legs, the king didn't weaken but became more powerful. Even the size of his body was incredibly growing, from about 1 meter tall to 5 meters tall. Now he looked like a giant, and his body was still growing. Yes, that's the power. That's the power that even demons would feel fear. That's the power of gods. The king was intoxicated with this immense power. The black paradises in his empty orbit became more and more vigorous, in sharp contrast to his withered body. The armor of revenge, which once represented the glory of the kingdom, was peeled off bit by bit from the king's body, symbolizing that the last knight of the kingdom had fallen completely and wasn't even qualified to wear the armor sacred revenge. The sacred stick, which represented the glory and power of the kingdom, had also changed from the shape of a stick to the shape of a sword stained with black flames. T Thunderbolt. Soft Water Palm. With the support of the Battle God's Seed, they were the two strongest attacks Yunshi had mastered. The past little baker had become a strong fighter. And it was only a few months after he began to practice himself. If he had more time, even if the king had 10 times the souls to burn, he wouldn't be matched for Yunshi, who had the talents from all the members of the Starwing Knights. Unfortunately, what Yunshi lacked most now was time. Knowing that there were monsters like Hua Hua and the twin witches in the world, Yunshi never felt self-satisfied about his power. Now, facing such a strong monster, the degenerated king, Yunshi was more depressed about his combat power. What should I do? Nothing to do but just try it. With the support of Kasina's seed, and now with a stronger body, Yunshi could finally try to reach the highest level of power he had obtained. God Sword Skill, Sky Flying Sword. God Sword Skill, Yunhai's Quadrant Sword. These two sword skills were far beyond the limits of any hero-ranked beings. Without the Battle God's Seed, Yunshi couldn't even meet the basic requirements to use the two God Sword skills. This also made him underestimate his achievements, because it was clear that Hua Hua could use the Sky Flying Sword at ease, although she hadn't reached the hero rank 2. Calculation was the foundation to use Yunhai's Quadrant Sword. He needed to calculate all the elements around him in order to get the track of the sword. What Yunshi was doing now was to launch the most basic startup of this God Sword skill. No, he wasn't calculating the king's attack trajectory. That was like predicting the future. Yunshi couldn't do it with his current computing power. What Yunshi was calculating now wasn't complicated, but it was an answer only he could figure out. Yunhai's Quadrant Sword. It could interpret the world rules from the most basic point of view. Yunshi couldn't do that. In fact, he was still at the beginning stage of learning this God Sword skill. There was still a long way he needed to go before he could master it. Introduction to Yunhai's Quadrant Sword Probability Calculus. Introduction to Calculus, even a monkey can understand it. Theory of Real Number. He hadn't finished a book yet. Probably in the world of Yunhai's Quadrant Sword, he was not smarter than a monkey. However, he also read other books after that. Is the cat dead or alive? I will kill that damned cat. The Ghost Cat of Mathematics, 2 theories about the question of Yunhai the Sky Sword. 36 proof techniques to verify if the cat is dead or alive. It's wrong to torment the cat. I will eat that cat. I don't believe this theory. I prefer to believe that cats never exist in this world. Yunhai, F***ku and your cat. It was amazing, but he understood some of them, especially the part about cats. Well, although he didn't know what the cat was that made countless scholars and even gods curse it, he understood some of the ideas. That was, even if he didn't understand real number, imaginary number, and probability, it didn't matter. At least, he could imagine himself as a cat. A cat exists and none exists. A cat can go anywhere and can't go anywhere. Yunshi himself didn't know whether it was right or wrong, but after doing so, he understood the essence of Yunhai's Quadrant Sword more or less. Now he was arousing his cat. Even though he couldn't calculate the king's trajectory, at least, he could calculate his own trajectory, calculating his strongest self. Input elements. Arouse the cat. The Battle God's Seed, the rigid body, the soft body, the crane wings twin sword, all the elements become countless numbers floating in front of Yunshi's eyes one after another. Yunshi didn't understand the meaning of these values at all, but it didn't prevent him from filling them in the cat. When numerous chaotic values finally pieced together a petite cat, countless waterfalls of values in Yunshi's eyes solidified in an instant. That's it. The requirement to achieve the God Sword skill, Sky Flying Sword. Yes, he couldn't calculate all things like Yunhai the Swordmaster. He could only figure out the answers about himself. This was one of the inspirations he got from the Starry Sky chessboard. He didn't know what the formalized series of moves were, but he could play Stargo. He didn't understand the formulas of Yunhai's Quadrant Sword, but he could put his values into these formulas to get the solution of himself. It was like a special key, letting Yunshi touch the strength that didn't belong to him now. This power was something he had observed and recorded, but he had no idea how to use it. Yun Hai's quadrant sword opened this mysterious door for him. Numerous complex elements were lit up one by one and interlinked. Finally, at the cost of consuming the energy of the battle god's seed, Yunshi depicted a future belonging to him. In a quadrant that only Yunshi could see, something glowed fiercely. The cat appeared. A sword pattern with wings was lit up. God sword skill, sky flying sword was unlocked. Probability. Real numbers. Imaginary numbers. Calculus. There are countless possibilities in the infinite world. In theory, if there were countless monkeys hitting keys at random for an infinite amount of time, they would almost surely type a great poem eventually. Yunshi did not have countless monkeys to help him calculate, but with talents from all the girls of the Starwing Knights, he had touched the door of the sky flying sword long ago. That door, for him, wasn't remote. Bringing all the values into the cat, he created a new use of Yun Hai's quadrant sword. That was the cat. At the moment when the cat appeared, Yunshi finally caught the shadow of the sky flying sword and unlocked one of his future possibilities. Unleash the sky flying sword. At this moment, Yunshi finally saw what the world looked like in Hua Hua's eyes. The color of the world had become richer than ever before. The crescent moon in the sky was a startling red. The degenerated king on the earth was a thrilling black. The ruins of the palace were a despairing gray. In a world full of red and black, gray and despair, only Yunshi had light, which could tear away all darkness and transcend all shackles. That was the light from the sky flying sword. The sky flying sword didn't mean a sword flying in the sky, but the will of flying indefinitely and freely. The earth, gravity, and even the world couldn't bind the will of flying. This was the sword. It was hard to imagine what kind of will and creativity could create such a god sword skill. Unlike Yun Hai's quadrant sword, which deduces and crushes all things, the sky flying sword doesn't follow any rules, overriding everything. It couldn't be a sword skill for mortals. Did his childhood sweetheart master such a powerful sword skill? No wonder that Hua Hua could defeat Ouroboros. The sky flying sword was just so strong. At this moment, Yunshi had absolute confidence. I can win. There is no way I will lose. All along, he had a little inferiority toward his own strength. After all, he was comparing himself with Hua Hua and the twin witches, who were far beyond the average. Needless to say, he was wanted by his 4 ex-girlfriends, who were probably stronger than gods. Under such tremendous pressure, even though he was growing stronger and stronger every day, Yunshi had never felt that he was strong. He lacked a kind of self-confidence, a confidence to face any opponents no matter who they were. But now, it was different. 2 doors had opened for him. Hua Hua's sky flying sword and Yun Hai's quadrant sword. When he saw the scenes behind the door, he finally understood. I am not weak. For the first time, he saw the world in his childhood sweetheart's eyes. Oh, the world is so beautiful and ugly. The world that was filled with innumerable rules, every gust of air was evolving into a world containing billions of changes. Meow, near his ear came the voice of a petite and lovely cat, which was the key to open the door of all things for Yunshi, the incarnation of Yun Hai's quadrant sword. Thank you. Yunshi sincerely thanked the legendary sword master, Yun Hai. Although his use of Yun Hai's quadrant sword was a little strange. But it was useful. Very useful. I like cats. From this moment on, Yunshi felt that cats might be the most lovely creatures in the endless gods' domains. Crane Wing's twin swords flew high above the sky, dancing and singing. At this moment, Yunshi comprehended Yun Hai's quadrant sword and used it as the key to unlocking Hua Hua's sky flying sword. The twin swords were also liberated from their ancient mission and gained a new life. The figures of 2 sword souls appeared in the air and smiled looking at each other. The inheritor of the twin sword had opened the door leading to Yun Hai's quadrant sword. The mission from Yun Hai had been completed. From this moment, they didn't need to maintain the form of standard god weapon. They didn't need to suppress their power. From this moment, they could evolve themselves, becoming real god weapon. Yunshi would give the evolved Crane Wing's twin swords a brand new name, a brand new history, and create a new legend. This was the ceremony for the end of the old era and the beginning of the new era. Impossible. My unfilial son, what are you doing? No matter how hard you struggle, you're going to die. Mortals will inevitably die. Only nightmares are eternal. The degenerated king raised the black sword in his hand with more fierce black flames burned. But now, Yunshi had no fear. Show me the power of the sky-flying sword. Recalling Hua Hua's expression when she killed the male fiery dragon, Yunshi showed a faint smile. The world had become different. My unfilial son, die. The holes on the degenerated king's body increased, and the king's mind became crazier. It was the persistence that would burn everything up. It was an incredible power. The king sacrificed everything he had in exchange for power, without considering what impact it would have on the last kingdom of the world. The Mad King, the Mad Power, and the red crescent moon made everything mad. Boom. The slash was stronger, faster and more violent than before. Like a cross to cut open the earth, a larger crack appeared on the ground in the center of the ruins of the palace. More crow doctors emerged from the black crack caused by the sword. This time, they grew wings and flew in the sky, making ominous howl under the bloody crescent moon. Caw, caw, caw. However, Yunshi was higher and faster than them. The king's attack couldn't even touch Yunshi's clothes. Like Hua Hua, there were transparent light halos that appeared behind Yunshi's feet. They were the lights of the sky-flying sword, they were marks which could ignore gravity and transcend the shackles of the earth. The king who had sacrificed his legs couldn't imagine the sword flying freely in the sky. For the vast majority of swordsmen, the battle takes place on the ground. For the sky-flying sword, its battlefield is infinite. The earth, the sky, and even the stars are all its battlefields. Yunshi could feel the heartfelt joy from the twin swords. Just like a good horse needed a good saddle, to god weapons, it was their luck to meet a master who could exert their power to the fullest. Because of this, only real geniuses could obtain god weapons recognition. If the user was too weak, many god weapons would even refuse to release their true power. However, Yunshi was different. As a mortal who had mastered 2 god sword skills, he was qualified to inherit and exert any god weapon's true power. In the face of his rapid growth, even the Crane Wing's twin swords could barely follow his footsteps. For this reason, the sword souls in the 2 swords finally made up their minds. It was time for rebirth. If we cannot catch up with our master's footsteps, then we have no meaning of existence. Ding, ding. With Yunshi's flying, the blade of the twin swords began to drop tiny debris bit by bit. The twin swords' exquisite bodies began to break up slowly. Like a butterfly hatched from a cocoon, the Crane Wing's twin swords began to evolve. Even with thousands of years of historical accumulation and the inheritance from Yunhai the Swordmaster, it was still a dangerous leap for the twin swords. If there was an accident, they wouldn't have any chance to survive. However, swords are lethal weapons. If they couldn't help their master in battles, then they would lose the meaning of existence. Crane Wing's twin swords didn't want to be such decorations. With Yunshi's talent, he met the requirements of almost all ownerless god weapons. As Yunshi's first standard god weapon, Crane Wing's twin swords would never allow such a situation to occur. It's time. In the twin swords, the male sword soul held the female sword soul's hands. Although they appeared as teenagers, sword souls actually had no gender. They just chose to visualize according to their preferences. What kind of future will we have? The girl sword soul looked at the boy sword soul somewhat uneasily. Like the 2 sides of fate, left and right, yin and yang, heaven and earth, the craftsman who cast the Crane Wing twin swords had decided this future from the very beginning. The twin swords would merge into one, and this future was also the future the 2 sword souls expected. However, the sword souls didn't expect that after thousands of years of inheritance, the future wouldn't be created by the original descendant of Yunhai the Swordmaster, but by another teenager. Now think of it, maybe that's fate. Yunhai's quadrant sword chose Yunshi, not the descendants of Yunhai's family. It had nothing to do with his bloodline, but something else had been inherited by Yunshi. He was the inheritor Yunhai the Sword Master hoped for. It depends on our new master. Believing in him will bring us a different world. The boy Sword Soul closed his eyes and pulled up the girl Sword Soul's hands. The girl Sword Soul closed her eyes and gently recited the mantra that had been engraved in her mind when they were forged. Like the twinkling stars in the night sky, our hearts are intertwined and not separated. Even if the two people can't hold each other's hands, as long as we still remember, in the wavering glory, in the real world and in the world of souls, the twin swords and the two sword souls all fragmented. All the rules had been reproduced. All the history and knowledge had been transformed into materials for casting a god weapon, and began to weave according to the rules only belonging to Yunshi. This was the day the Crane Wing's twin swords disappeared. This was the day Yunshi's god weapon was forged. Come down. Come down. Come down and fight with me. On the ground, the degenerated king roared and waved his black sword, trying to attack Yunshi. Unfortunately, Yunshi was suspended in the sky. He was far out of the attack range of the king's sword. And because of the evolution of the Crane Wing's twin swords, Yunshi also stopped his attack and suspended himself in the air. He was surrounded by numerous scattered, glittering fragments. These were the fragments of the Crane Wing's twin swords. In order to catch up with Yunshi's footsteps, the twin swords resolutely chose the most difficult road. All the materials that made up the twin swords had become fragments. From this moment on, the twin swords actually disappeared. The pair of sword souls chose to return everything to zero. Yunhai's quadrant sword only needed one heir. The twin sword souls believed that even if they searched all of the endless gods' domains, they couldn't find anyone else who was more suitable for Yunhai's quadrant sword than Yunshi. The meeting of that day was the fate of the twin swords. Yunshi saw all of the history of the Crane Wing's twin swords. In distant times, at the top of the mountains, the tall giant hammered out the embryo of the twin sword. Yunhai came from the clouds, giving the twin swords their names. I name you Crane Wing's twin swords. These two swords should be able to shelter my family for 1,000 years. If any of my descendants can understand the sword meaning I hide in the twin sword, then they are qualified to inherit my legacy. If not, then I have to say that they have no luck to study my Yunhai's quadrant sword. In the world, there is no family that can never be extinguished. 1,000 years is enough. If my family doesn't have the qualification, then when the two sword souls awake from inside the twin swords, they can choose their master themselves. I don't know who you are and what time it is, but since you have been chosen by the twin swords, you can inherit my legacy. My strongest sword skill, Yunhai's quadrant sword. Remember, the mystery of this sword skill is not about the sword, but in the heart. This was the last legacy Yunhai left for his family before leaving the White Lotus sword domain. At that time, no one in the world knew how terrible Yunhai's quadrant sword was. On that day, Yunhai the sword master wandered on the top of mountains, breaking the sky and tearing the whole world apart with his sword. 1,000 years later, Yunshi got the Crane Wing twin swords and Yunhai's quadrant sword. Over the past 1,000 years, the two souls in the twin swords gradually grew up, becoming perfect yin and yang sword souls, becoming a boy and a girl. The boy sword soul was a teenager with long hair hanging at his feet with clear eyes. The girl sword soul was a lovely girl with a bun-like hairstyle and a gossamer dress. They had been waiting for a hope, a promise for so many years. For the sake of this promise, they suppressed their impulse to evolve over and over again, just waiting for the right person to appear. Today, the time had come. The long wait had ended. In order to follow the new master and create a new history, the twin sword souls made a choice. Like the twinkling stars in the night sky, our hearts are intertwined and not separated. Even if two people can't hold each other's hands, as long as we still remember, the core material for forging the twin swords was restored to the original shape. They were the fragments of countless stars. They were the dust of stars, which gathered by chance in the endless sky. Like travelers in the sky, the fragments of these stars didn't follow any fixed trajectory, but traveled freely through countless stars, recording the history of the birth and death of countless worlds, and eventually fell into the earth and condensed into crystals. The Crystal of Stars is their name. They are the best material for forging a god weapon. They are the best prototype to accomplish any fantasies. Because the memory of stars contains everything. The stars that gestated intelligent species. The stars that were destroyed by countless eruptions. The stars that breed super fantastic creatures and were eventually swallowed up by these fantastic creatures. The dust of these stars floated in the void and eventually accidentally gathered together, traveled with comets and eventually fell into some worlds, gathering into crystals over tens of millions of years. The core material of the twin swords was these crystals. Even the gods would feel jealous if they knew about it. The two swords disintegrated themselves and returned to their original shape. Everything was for Yun-Shi, for that promise. Oh, you are also children of stars. Yun-Shi could feel the last traces left by the two sword souls. In order to forge a unique sword for Yun-Shi, the two sword souls chose to transform themselves into materials and merge into the dust of the stars. For Yun-Shi's sake, the sword souls abandoned everything. Sword. Draw your sword. The dust that danced around Yun-Shi made a tender voice. Since Yun-Shi needed a sword, then the stars would make the sword he wanted. This was also the last perseverance of the two swords before they turned everything back to zero. Yun-Shi had no experience in forging a god weapon. That's for sure. Several months ago, he was still a baker. Where would he deal with such a thing? In the mortal world, even a glance at a god weapon was an extravagant hope. For people living in small towns, it was only a legend in stories. Weapons and equipment used by heroes? God's grace. The weapons that could even kill gods. There were too many types and possibilities. Now the chance of forging his own god weapon appeared, Yun-Shi was somewhat at a loss. Draw your sword. Yun-Shi watched the dust of the stars around him and fell into perplexity. There is no sword here. Sword, where is it? What kind of sword does he need? Is it a sword that can crush even the stars in the sky? The stardust immediately revealed a giant sword about 2 meters long, similar to Hua's Tyrannosaurus Emperor's sword and with the head of a roaring dragon at its handle. Just look at it. Yun-Shi knew that it was a powerful sword for fierce and ambitious people. It would be absolutely no problem to smash the stars with it. As long as Yun-Shi nodded, the sword would come to Yun-Shi's hand in no time. As long as the sword was pulled out, Yun-Shi would surely become a hero that could slay even dragons. No. Not this one. Yun-Shi shook his head. This sword was strong enough, but it was not suitable for him. It should be more suitable for Hua. With the disappearance of the giant sword, Yun-Shi began to think about the sword more suitable for him. Perhaps I need a sword that can improve my wisdom. Is such a sword suitable for me? Like sensing Yun-Shi's expectations, under the golden twin trees, a body wooden sword appeared in Yun-Shi's eyes. In the quiet shade, the wooden sword with a pale golden halo had an extraordinary attraction for Yun-Shi. Probably, this is the right one. Yun-Shi was very satisfied with this wooden sword. But before Yun-Shi reached out, he felt cold all over his body, and seemed to have countless huge malicious sensations staring at the wooden sword. Bald donkey. Blade thief. Bare-headed monk. Across time and space, the sound of curses bombarded the wooden sword, and the dust of the stars that made up the outline of the wooden sword were trembling. It does seem that this sword is cursed by the will of the world. Yun-Shi watched the wooden sword disappear in front of him. Well, okay, is there anything else? Yun-Shi continued to wait, and the dust of the stars didn't let Yun-Shi down, and began to condense new swords that may be suitable for him. Compared with the memory capacity of stardust, human memory was not worth mentioning. In the memories of the stars, there were countless swords, even including the swords of gods. Amongst all of them, there must be a sword suitable for Yun-Shi. A demon sword about 3 meters long. A sacred cross sword with golden lights. A saint sword with aurora. A god sword with thunder and lighting as its handle and body. Each sword was a powerful god weapon with a unique history and characteristics. Each sword was very suitable for Yun-Shi. It all depended on Yunshi's choice. After looking at hundreds of swords, Yunshi still couldn't decide which one to choose. This was not a choice difficulty, but because his knowledge of the god weapons was too little. He didn't know any of them. How could he make a decision? Give me the best sword for me, please. Eventually, Yunshi chose to believe in the dust of the stars. The dust of the stars dancing around Yunshi began to split and interlace and finally condensed into 3 different weapons. Without exception, they were swords, representing different rules and different nature, but they were all swords above countless possibilities. The first sword was a red and black demon sword. The master of this sword traveled all over the heavens, slaughtered the world serpent and challenged the god known as omniscient and omnipotent. The red and black demon sword slaughtered millions of angels, and finally killed the supreme god. Its power made Yunshi feel fear from the bottom of his heart. God Slayer. Bury everything in the abyss. The master of this sword was stronger than the deicide sky sword in the sky sword god's domain. Its master was strong enough to challenge the order of the stars. This sword was an absolute demon's sword. The second sword was a sword blocked by innumerable chains. Yunshi couldn't even see its true shape clearly. Every chain that bound the sword was sealed with a horrible monster. These horrible monsters showed a chilling weird gesture. If an ordinary person was looking at the sword, that person would go mad instantly. This sword, its existence itself would cause great disasters. Even if this sword has not yet appeared, it only showed a rough outline. It had given Yunshi the creeps. Why? Is this sword really suitable for me? It's even more ferocious than the previous one. The third sword was a transparent sword, but vaguely reflects the beautiful figure of girls. Girls have perfect features with wings of different colors stretched out behind them. Vigorous green wings that can bring endless vitality. Cold black wings that can devour all things. Holy silver wings that can merge the power of earth, water, wind, and fire. Well, that's it. Yunshi made a choice. The past, the present, and the future was in different shapes. Amongst the 3 swords representing 3 different powers, Yunshi chose the last one. The reason for choosing the third one was simple. Because this sword was the most beautiful one, and it released the most familiar atmosphere Yunshi could feel. Well, that's it. Since even the dust of the stars thought that these 3 swords were the best, there was no need to doubt them. While Yunshi made his choice, the red and black demon sword disappeared first in front of him, and the unknown sword with numerous chains fled, just like what happened when he chose the 3-star spirits. However, Yunshi had a kind of vague foreboding that he would still deal with those 2 swords in the future. The last sword left was the transparent crystal sword reflecting the girls. On the colorless and transparent sword body were the feathery figures of the girls, weaving a 7-color dreamlike world. Now, Yunshi could see only 3 colors. Green represents endless vitality. Black stands for cold silence. Silver represents sacred supreme silver. 3 colors were far from the limit of the girls, and more colors were hidden in the colorful world. Sword. Choose. Countless dust of the stars began to spin, which was a big step on the way for the Starchild to grow up. From this moment on, Yunshi finally possessed the unique god weapon cast by the dust of the stars for him. Reaching out and touching the revolving dust, Yunshi saw the memories of countless stars. That was the traces of thousands of years' travel. The memory still was eulogized by the dust of the stars. If it hadn't been for Yunshi, the dust would have continued their journey. If the Crane Wings twin swords didn't meet Yunshi, they would decay in tens of millions of years, return to their original materials and continue to fulfill the mission as the dust of the stars. Only when they were cast into a god weapon could the dust of the stars really have a new life, weave new legends and new myths. Only a god weapon is immortal. Even after thousands of years, millions of years, the god weapon would still stay and witness the changes of the universe. Every god weapon had more or less the crystallization of the dust of the stars, so the dust of the stars could find so many swords for Yunshi. In fact, the number of the dust of the stars the twin swords had was not enough to make any of these 3 swords, and Yunshi's own strength was far below the level of forging such god weapons. These 3 swords had the power to transcend the world. To smash the stars was only a blink of an eye for these 3 swords. The sword woven by the dust of the stars for Yunshi was just a rough prototype. This crystal sword would accompany Yunshi and grow up together and witness the journey of the Starchild. Name. What's the name? This sword had no name now, because it was a sword that belongs to the future. A holy sword only existed in theory at this time point. No, it wasn't enough to describe the sword with holy or evil. The girls dancing on the transparent sword represented the transcendent existence beyond the rules of the universe. They could be gods above gods, or demons above demons. They could protect a world for thousands of years just for a promise, or they could eat a world as food when they wanted. They came from the darkest places, but had the most gorgeous wings. Somehow, the girls of the Starwing Knights suddenly appeared in Yunshi's mind. Without their support, without their talents, maybe now he was still a small-time baker on the road of escaping his destiny. The girls of the Starwing Knights believed in him so much that they still used this name in this dream trial. Then, in return, he would dye the god weapon who would accompany him all his life with their colors. He would name it Starwings. When Yunshi decided the true name of the sword, countless feathers flew out of the dust of the stars. That was the world's recognition of the god weapon. That was a poem woven by the laws of the universe. They were not gods, but above gods. They stood on countless worlds, their wings covered the sky, and their names shook the stars. Their power interlaced, and eventually transformed into a sword because of a certain agreement, a sword that would shock the entire endless gods' domains in the future. At this moment, the god weapon came to Yunshi's hand from the distant future and was given its only real name. Starwings. This was the end of the time of the Crane Wings twin swords. This was the beginning of the time of the Starwings. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.